What if Hermione Granger wasn't the only brilliant witch in the family? Today, we uncover the untold story of a sibling hidden in the shadows of Hogwarts. Welcome to Grimoire Audiobooks, where stories take on a life of their own. Today, we're diving into Hermione's Sister by Pottergirl 123, a fanfiction that reimagines the Harry Potter universe through a fresh and heartfelt perspective. Disclaimer: please note that this is a fan-created work and not part of the official Harry Potter canon. All rights to the original series belong to J.K. Rowling, and this audiobook adaptation is for entertainment purposes only. Hermione's Sister is a beloved fanfiction that explores what it might be like if Hermione Granger had a sibling just as magical and possibly just as clever. Written by Pottergirl 123, this story adds depth and new dynamics to the Granger family while weaving its own unique twists into the wizarding world. Fanfiction like Hermione's Sister continues to thrive as a way for fans to reimagine and expand upon the original series. It's an amazing testament to how the wizarding world inspires creativity and connection among its readers. Pottergirl 123, like many fanfiction authors, brings their passion for storytelling to the forefront with imaginative scenarios and compelling characters. Their work has resonated with readers looking for more layers to the Harry Potter universe. Now, let's dive into this magical journey of family, friendship, and discovery in Hermione's Sister. Hermione's Sister by Pottergirl 123. Emma's POV. Tweet, tweet. I woke up to the sounds of birds chirping. I sat up to see what day it was, and turns out it's July 31st. My birthday. I rushed out of bed and hurried to my bathroom to the sink. I brushed my teeth, then decided what to wear. I was going to wear a Percy Jackson shirt with leggings, and I pinned my hair back into a braid. I ran downstairs. Even though I am turning 11, I still act like a 5-year-old on their birthday. I ran into my parents' arms. "Happy birthday, dear," Mum said. I told her thanks and sat down to eat breakfast. "Where's Hermione?" I asked. "She went out to read," Dad said. I frowned. I thought my big sister would be here on my birthday. My dad gave me 11 pancakes. 11? Wow, I said, happily eating them. "Em," said a familiar voice. "Hermione," I said. I ran to hug her. "Happy birthday, little sis. Hermione and I have been friends since the day I was born." I always stood up for her. I sat back down to eat when I saw an owl flying towards me. It kept coming closer until, crash. It broke our window and flew inside. It got up and flew away, dropping 2 pieces of paper. They were letters addressed to me and Hermione. They said, "Dear Miss Granger, you have been accepted into Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st, so we need your owl before then. Please excuse the lateness of this letter. It was supposed to arrive on July 21st. You are only 11 today, but you seem so gifted that you got yours early. Point 2. Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress." I was going to ask what Hogwarts was when a big man crushed our door and said, "Sorry, Abu," at Hermione's POV. The big man stumbled through our door. He had a big beard and long hair. "Harry? Harry Potter," he grumbled. I walked up. "This isn't the Potter residence. It's the Grangers. What is your business here?" I stated. He sighed. "I'm from Hogwarts. I'm supposed to be getting a boy named Harry." "What?" M said. "Hogwarts is a school," he began. "You and your sis here, and witches." 1 inch, well, that's not very nice, I said, putting my brave face on. "No, not like that. You can do magic. Ever done something strange when you were sad or angry?" We both nodded. Em once made all of our building blocks disappear in kindergarten because she was so mad they kept falling down. I once made our teacher turn into a frog because I didn't like my grade point 16-inch. "You will go to Hogwarts to control this magic and use it for good. Will you let them go?" he said, turning to our parents. My mom actually got him tea, and Mom and Dad talked for a few seconds and they nodded. Do you want to go? He asked me, and M nodded, and I slowly nodded. I don't know why, but I don't trust this man. 1 inch. Oh, okay, so packin', he said happily. Then he looked at his watch and said, I have to get Harry, you want to come? He asked us again. Oh, Mum, Dad, can I go? Please, exclaimed M. She looked like today was the best day of her life. They laughed and said, sure. You comin'? Asked Hagrid to me. No thanks, I said. Emma's POV. Hagrid and I left to go to somewhere in the middle of the ocean. We got to ride his flying motorcycle. Once we got there, he told me to wait outside as he talked to the kid. Once he was done, or I assumed he was done, a boy with glasses, messy black hair, and emerald green eyes came out. I held my hand out and said, Hi, I'm Emma Granger, I said. He shook it and said, Hi, Emma Granger. I'm Harry Potter. Emma's POV. Hi, Harry, I said. Who are your parents? Mine are non-magical people. Hagrid cut me off. Muggles, he corrected. I nodded. My parents are muggles. He frowned. My parents are dead, he said calmly. Oh, I'm sorry, I said. No, it's fine, honestly, I'm over it, he responded, waving it off. Now come on, said Hagrid. We gotta take Emma here homes. Where will Harry go? I asked. He's comin', why me? Hagrid responded. We got in the flying motorcycle and flew home. I still can't get over the fact that it flies. Once I got home, Hagrid gave me and Hermione some huge gold coins. Those are galleons, he said. I gave you Abu 100, so that'll be enough to buy all of your school supplies. He told Mom and Dad to take us somewhere called the Leaky Cauldron and tap the something brick. I wasn't paying too much attention. Then he said bye, and he and Harry left. I asked Mom where we had to go, and she said, Dear, I will tell you in the morning. For now, get some rest, and happy birthday. I never realized how long it took to drive to Harry's place and back, because it was nightfall already. I went up to my room and pounced on my bed. I changed and got in the covers. As I was going to bed, I saw another owl outside my window holding a package. I opened the window and let it in. It gave me the package and flew off. I opened it. Inside was the most beautiful ring I've ever seen. It was black silver with a big blue sapphire in the middle. There was a card too. It said happy birthday in swirly letters like the moon. I had changed. Yesterday I was just Emma Granger, regular girl. Today I was Emma Granger, 11-year-old witch. I woke up the next morning tired and decided to open my letter again. It said the same thing, except I decided to look at the list of supplies. First-year students will require uniform, 3 sets of plain work robes, black, 1 plain pointed hat, black, for day wear, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar, 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all students' clothes should carry name tags at all times. Books. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory by Adalbert Waffling. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Philetus Bohr. Magical Drafts and Potions by Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. Other Equipment. 1 wand. 1 cauldron, pewter, standard size 2. 1 set of glass or crystal files. 1 telescope. 1 set of brass scales. Students may also bring an owl, a cat, or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. I wondered if we could find all of this stuff in London. I brushed my teeth and changed into a red shirt, leggings, and black Converse. I walked downstairs and sat down at the table. I made myself some cereal and started eating. Mom, Dad, and Hermione were already done. When are we going to buy all the school supplies? I asked as I quickly finished my cereal. Right now, once you're done eating, said Hermione. I stood up to wash my plate, and we left. The leaky cauldron wasn't that far. Honestly, it was in driving distance. We got out of the car and walked through the store. A lot of people looked at us weird, but I ignored them. We finally got to the back of the store, and Mom and Dad pushed a certain brick. Crack. A hole opened up, and then more and more and more and more, and then there was a huge archway leading to a whole alley. Welcome to Diagon Alley, said a voice. I turned around to see a witch with her grandson. Thanks, I said back. We all walked inside, and I got out my list. Okay, family, first we need to go to Madame Malkin's for our uniform. Lucky for us, it was the first store there. We first bought the robes, then the hat, then one by one we got things off the list. The next place was Flourish and Blot's the bookstore. We got all of our books there, and really quickly too. Soon we knocked everything off the list, except an animal and a wand. I doubted Mom and Dad were going to get me an animal, so we went to get a wand. We asked around, and apparently the best place to get them was Ollivander's. We walked there. Once we got inside, it looked abandoned. Hello, I said. Suddenly, a man came in and said, hello, indeed. Hi, I'm Emma Granger, and this is my sister Hermione Granger. We came here for wands, I said, getting straight to the point. He chuckled. Hello, Miss Grangers. Hermione, we shall find you a wand first. Hermione stepped up as Ollivander handed her a grayish wand and said, Holly and Phoenix Feather Core, try it. She gave it a flick and something exploded in the back. Oh dear, he said. He gave her another one. Vine Wood and Dragon Heartstring Core, he said. She gave it a flick and a light turned on. Yes. Yes, he said. That will be 10 galleons, please. Mom handed him the money. Now for you, Emma, he said. He handed me many more wands than Hermione. Finally, we decided on a wand with rosewood, and for the core, phoenix feather. We paid for my wand, and my parents told me and Hermione to sit outside because they had to run an errand. We sat outside until this blonde, almost white-haired boy came up to us. Who are you, and why are you sitting outside of Ollivander's? He asked. That's such a polite and civilized way to start a conversation, I said, sarcastically. Apologies, Draco Malfoy, and you are? He said. I'm Emma Granger, and this is my sister, Hermione Granger, I said. He nodded. Do you know what house you'll be in at Hogwarts? He asked. No. Hermione said. Let's hope you'll be in Slytherin. It's the best one, he said, smirking. Yeah, nice talking to you, but I see my parents by, I said. He waved goodbye. I saw Mom and Dad holding something, a cage, with an owl in it. Happy birthday, dear, they said when we got to them. They gave me the owl. Thank you, I said. It was a gray owl with white and black feathers here and there. Athena, I said. Huh? Asked Hermione. That's her name. We drove home, and we had been there all day. I had dinner and sat down on my bed. I looked at Athena and whispered, best gift ever, and fell asleep. Time skipped to September 1st. Emma's POV. I woke up that morning as happy as I thought Hermione would never be, even when she was reading a book. Today was the day. Today was when I was going to Hogwarts. I leaped out of bed and brushed my teeth. I put on my best shirt, leggings, and Converse and ran downstairs. Hermione was practicing magic. She had been studying the whole summer after we had gotten our books. Hermione and Mum went back for Hermione to get some extra books. Once I got downstairs, I had cereal for breakfast and saw Hermione, of course, reading at the table. Hermione, No books at the table, scolded Mum. Sorry, Mum, said Hermione, blushing. She put her book on the counter and started eating.
Sorry I didn't notice you, she said.
Yeah, I was wondering how long it would take you to realize that your little sister was sitting at the table, I said. Are you nervous? Asked Dad. No, I said, while Hermione said yes. Our parents laughed.
Don't be, said Mum.
Yeah, Hermione, I said, being fake mad at her. We both laughed. Do you have your train tickets? Asked Dad. We held them out. Right here, said Hermione. Are you done packing? Asked Mum. Oh no, I'm not done yet. Mum, Hermione, help, I screamed. We all ran upstairs and somehow I finished packing. We drove to King's Cross Station and got our trunks. I looked at our ticket to see which platform we had to go on. It said platform 9 3/4.
Huh.
I didn't mention this to Mum and Dad because they had enough to worry about. We got a trolley to hold all of our stuff, and when we were at the platforms, Mum burst into tears. IHM GGGOing TT to MISS YYQSSO MMUK, she said through tears. I told her that we would be fine, and they left. Asked Hermione. Yeah, I said. Where's platform 9 3/4? She asked. I was about to say I didn't know, when I heard an old lady say, off to Hogwarts to her grandson. I ran over to them. Hello there, I'm Emma Granger, and this is my sister. We were wondering how we could get on the platform. Hey, you're that lady from Diagon Alley, said Hermione. Oh, and you are those two girls who wouldn't get out of the way, she exclaimed. We are sorry if we stopped you, but could you tell us how to get on the train? Pleaded Hermione. Fine, said the old woman. Run through the middle of platform 9 and 10. Thank you, I exclaimed. Have a nice day. We went back to our trolleys and ran. I felt warmth go through my body as I went through the wall and to a whole new platform. There was a sign that said platform 9 3/4 Hogwarts Express. I guess we're here, I joked. Hermione and I put our trunks away when we saw the lady's grandson come through the border. He dropped his trolley. We ran over to help him. Hi, I said. Hi, I'm Neville Longbottom, he said, shaking. Sorry about Gran. It's all right, Hermione said. How can we repay you? I asked. Trevor, he said as his toad hopped away. You can help me find my toad, he said. We decided to split up, Hermione and me and Neville. We chased the toad into the train and looked for a long time. We changed into our robes and started looking again. We searched everywhere until there was only one compartment left. We looked inside to see a redhead waving his wand. Have you seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one, said Hermione. Realization spread across her face. Are you doing magic? Let's see it then, she said to the redhead. Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow. Turn this stupid fat rat yellow. He started waving his wand like a madman. Are you sure that's a real spell? I've tried some simple ones and they've all worked for me, said Hermione. Blimey, you're Harry Potter, she said excitedly. Harry, I said. Emma, he said. I'm Hermione Granger, and you are? Hermione said, turning to the redhead. Ron Weasley, he said, his mouth filled with chocolate. Pleasure, said Hermione with a dirty look on her face. You two should change into your robes. I expect we'll be arriving soon, she said, turning to Ron. She said, you've got dirt on your nose, just there. She left, and I sat down. Sorry, she's not usually bossy. Hi, I'm Emma Granger. We talked until the train halted. I looked out the window and saw the massive castle outside. This was going to be a great year. Emma's POV. The train stopped, and everyone started to exit. Harry and Ron had already changed into their robes. Since first years were the last ones out, we had to wait a long time. Once it was my turn to step out, I saw a smiling, familiar face. Hagrid. I yelled, giving him a hug. Hello there, Emma, he said, hugging me back. Now he addressed all the first years. All right, first years leased up. He led us to a big lake with boats. No more N4 to a boat. We had to wait our turn, but I climbed in a boat along with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The boats started moving on their own as I sat in awe. We kept going until we got to the mainland. Once we got there, I heard a croak. Trevor, yelled Neville. He picked up his toad and ran back into the crowd. Hagrid led us inside the huge building. Once we got inside, a stern-looking lady approached us. I can take them from here, Hagrid, she said. Hello, first years. I am Professor McGonagall. I teach Transfiguration. Follow me, please. Her hair was in a tight bun, and she had emerald green robes. She scared me. She led us to the entrance hall, and we had to wait behind huge doors. I could hear a lot of noise, so the other students must already be in there. Wait here until we are ready for you, she said, going inside. The sorting will begin momentarily. How exactly do they sort us? Harry and I asked at the same time. I don't know. My brother Fred said it's some kind of test that hurts a lot, but he was joking, said Ron. Let's just hope you aren't in Slytherin. Why? I asked. There isn't a wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin, answered Ron. I nodded just then. Professor McGonagall said, We are ready. The doors opened. Make a line, please, commanded Professor McGonagall. She led us towards a dusty old hat. Maybe they will pull a bunny out of it to tell us our house. I whispered to Harry. Suddenly, the hat burst into song. Oh, you may not think me pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head. The sorting hat can't see. So try me on, and I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart, their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, one if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folks use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on. Don't be afraid. And don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap. Everyone clapped. Professor McGonagall started calling out names. We just have to try on the hat, whispered Harry. I guess, answered Ron. Abbott Hannah. A girl with pigtails went up to the stand. Hufflepuff. Bones Susan's. Hufflepuff. Boot Terry. Ravenclaw. Brocklehurst Mandy. Ravenclaw. Brown Lavender. Gryffindor. Bulstrode Millicent. Slytherin. I understand why everyone didn't like Slytherin. They didn't look very nice. Finch Fletchley Justin. Hufflepuff. Finnegan Seamus. Gryffindor. Granger Hermione. I froze as I heard my sister's name. Gryffindor. Why wasn't I called? Longbottom. Neville. I heard a few snickers from the crowd. Gryffindor. Malfoy. Draco. Slytherin. I guess Draco got his wish. There were a bunch of other names when I finally heard Potter, Harry. Whispers went through the crowd. Harry's sorting took the longest. It seemed like he was talking to the hat, but finally I heard Gryffindor. There were some other names, and then I heard Weasley, Ronald, Gryffindor, Zabini Blaze, Slytherin, and finally our youngest student, Granger, Emma. I stepped up to the hat. Oh, what to do with you? Plenty of courage, kindness, very sharp in the mind, yet cunning. Not Slytherin, I repeated over and over. All right, if no Slytherin, better be Gryffindor. Emma's POV. Gryffindor, yelled the Sorting Hat. Dumbledore instantly had a dark look on his face as he got up and took my hand. Miss Granger, would you accompany me to my office? He asked. I nodded. I mean, you can't say no to the headmaster. He led me to his office and said, "Licorice snap," and the huge gargoyle opened a staircase. I walked up it and went into a beautiful room with artifacts that looked like they dated back to Godric Gryffindor knows when. I heard someone say that in the hall, so I kind of picked it up. Headmaster, I heard in a cold voice. I turned around and saw a man with long, black, greasy hair who had a cold look on his face. Yes, Severus, I summoned you. We have another, said Dumbledore. He looked worried, but I could tell he was trying to hide it for my sake. Another, exclaimed Professor McGonagall. When did she get in here? I wondered. Excuse me, I asked. They all looked at me. What am I another of exactly? Sweet Emma, said Dumbledore. You are an interhouse student. What's that? I asked. That means that you fit in 2 or more houses. We have had Slytherin and Ravenclaw very often, but never Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, said Professor McGonagall matter-of-factly. So, which house do I go to? I asked worried. Would they send me home? Where would I fit? Questions ran through my head until Dumbledore said, You may choose. What? I asked. You may choose your house, because the Sorting Hat could not. Dumbledore repeated. I choose Gryffindor. Dumbledore opened his mouth to say something, but I continued. If I can choose both, then I will. Dumbledore nodded. Then Severus said something. Headmaster, may I suggest that this is a good idea? The girl can fulfill her full potential in both classes. He said it in a slimy way, as if he was a snake. He must be head of Slytherin. I agree with Severus, said Dumbledore. You'll be given your schedule soon, Emma. For now, go enjoy the feast with your friends, and you may follow either Gryffindor or Ravenclaws. Prefects to the common room. Dumbledore dismissed me, and the second I got out, I ran into Hermione, Ron, and Harry. What happened? They asked. Well, I started and explained everything to them. Bloody hell, muttered Ron once I was done. Yeah, I said. We walked back to the Great Hall, and somehow Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall, and Severus were already there. Who's that? Asked pointing to Severus. That's Snape. Potions teacher, head of Slytherin, and nasty to everyone. He never was interested in potions, though. Everyone knows that he's after Quirrell's job. Defense against the dark arts, said Percy, Ron's older brother. I nodded. I decided to sit at the Gryffindor table for today. I heard Dumbledore cough. He stood up. All eyes were on him. He opened his arms, as if he was happy to see us all. Welcome, he said. Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are. Nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you. He sat back down. Everyone clapped and cheered, so I joined along. I heard Harry ask if he was mad. Percy responded saying he was a little mad. You going to eat? Asked my sister. I stared wide-eyed at the table. There was every food imaginable on the table. Potatoes, rice, sauce, turkey, peas, carrots, ice cream, and so much more. I got everything. I saw Harry clutch his scar. You okay? I asked.
Fine, he said.
Dumbledore stood up again, and we were all silent. Ahem, just a few more words now that we are all fed and watered. I have a few start-of-term notices to give you. First-year pupils should note that the forest on grounds is forbidden to all pupils. And a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well. Dumbledore looked over to the Weasley twins. I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, To remind you that no magic shall be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held second week of term. Anyone interested in playing for their house teams should contact Madam Hooch. Finally, I should tell you that the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death, he said seriously. I looked at Harry, and he looked confused too. Ron had told me about Quidditch, and it seemed like fun. I walked over to the other side of the table because they had some more potatoes over there. I plopped myself down right by the Weasley twins. They eyed me curiously, but almost immediately after, they stuck out their hands. "We're Gred and Forge Weasley, and you ours?" One of them said. Emma Granger," I said, shaking both of their hands. That's too boring." "You are now Evangeline,"
Gred said.
"Oh no, I liked Emma," I said in fake innocence and annoyance. I stood up because I saw Dumbledore about to make the announcement to dismiss us. By Fred and George, I smirked as I turned on my heels to go back. I quickly made my way back to our bench as Dumbledore made his way to the podium. He dismissed us and all the food disappeared. Percy led us to the common room and to our dorms. I was sharing with Hermione, Lavender Brown, Parvati Patil, and 2 other girls I didn't talk to. I changed into sleepwear and, surprisingly, all of my stuff was already in the dorm. I got in bed and though this will be a great year, and I drifted off to sleep. Whispers followed Harry and me wherever we went, and people creeped outside the common room to get a good look at us. We were the boy who lived, that weird girl that's in 2 houses, and the 6th ginger kid to come to Hogwarts.
Arg.
Harry groaned one day. I have enough to worry about with classes and those dumb staircases. Now I have to deal with people talking about me. I knew what he meant about the staircases. They moved every 30 seconds, and it was very annoying. I got lost the other day because of them. "It's the doors too, mate," said Ron, slumping his head against the table. "Some of the doors wouldn't open unless you tickle them, or politely ask them." "You guys," I said, hitting their arms. "We are in a magic school, for Godric's sake." "Ron, that may not be so amazing to you, but for me and Harry it is. So suck it up and be boys. Be amazed at ridiculous things." Honestly, my least favorite part was Peeves the poltergeist. He always was getting kids in trouble. The only person that might be worse than Peeves would be Argus Filch, the caretaker. He did the same thing as Peeves, except he didn't prank. You could tell he hated kids. The classes weren't so bad. Professor Sprout taught herbology, and Professor Flitwick taught charms. He was so short he had to stand on books to see students. Professor Binns taught history of magic, and that was the most boring class ever. Even more boring than Muggle history, but he did no more history than anyone at Hogwarts. He was a ghost. Professor McGonagall taught transfiguration, and that was my favorite class. We had to turn a match into a needle. By the end, I had managed to make it a half needle, and Hermione had been able to make it a full-on needle. McGonagall praised her for doing so. Defense against the dark arts was also boring, but not quite history of magic. Ron groaned again. "What is this time?" I exclaimed, exasperated. "We have double potions with Slytherins today. Snape is the head of Slytherin House, and he favors them." Ron replied, groaning again. "Wish McGonagall favored us," said Harry. "I wish she favored us, so she wouldn't give us as much homework." Eska. Hundreds of owls flew into the Great Hall, most carrying mail, others not. Athena hadn't brought me anything yet, but it would be cool to get some owl mail. Tweet, tweet. I smiled. I recognized those 2 birds. Hedwig and Athena were, in a friendly way, fighting over some mail. Athena won, yay, and gave me the mail. I smirked at Harry, and he grunted. In huge, messy handwriting, there was a message scrawled. "Dear Harry or Emma, Hedwig and Athena were fighting over this, and I didn't know who to address it to. I know you get Friday afternoons off, so would you like to come around and have a cup of tea with me around 3? I want to hear all about it your first week. Send an answer back with Athena or Hedwig. Hagrid. I smiled and wrote yes on a piece of paper and sent Athena off again. I was glad I had Hagrid to look forward to because potions sounded horrible. And it was indeed horrible. I could tell Snape hated me from the moment he saw me. Potions took place in the dungeons, and it was freezing in there. Snape started by calling roll, and like every other teacher, he paused at Harry's name. Harry Potter, our new celebrity, he said celebrity with disgust. Malfoy and his 2 henchmen, Crabbe and Goyle, laughed. I clenched my fists. He finished calling roll and started giving us a speech on potions and how important they are. I tuned in when I heard the word dunderheads. Hermione sat up, as if she was determined to prove that she wasn't a dunderhead. Potter. Snape said, what would I get if I added a powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry looked clueless. I don't know, sir, was all he said. Of course, with Hermione quizzing me all the time over the summer, knew the answer, so I raised my hand, but not as high as my sister's. He sneered and said, Tiske, clearly fame isn't everything. Let's try again. Where would you look if I told you to find a Bezoars? I again raised my hand a little higher, but he still ignored it. I don't know, sir, he said again. What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? He asked, trying to embarrass Harry even farther. I raised my hand a little higher, but my sister was out of her seat. I don't know, sir, but you should try the Granger girls. I think they know. Harry said, gesturing to me and Hermione. Put your hand down, he said to us. For your information, Potter, asphodel and wormwood make a sleeping potion so powerful, it is known as the Draught of Living Death. A bezoar is located in the stomach of a goat and will cure most poisons. As for monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the same plant, also called aconite. Well, why aren't you copying that down? Everyone started looking for their quills and took notes. The rest of potions went like this. Snape embarrassing Harry and taking away points. Can I go to Hagrid's with you guys? Ron asked once we were dismissed. Sure, I said. We walked down there, and the first thing we heard was back, Fong. This repeated about 10 times, and then Hagrid let us in. This is Ron, said Harry, pointing at him. Another Weasley, eh? I'm going to spend me life chasing those twins, yours, Hagrid said. We talked about Ron's family and Snape. Hagrid thought he didn't hate Harry, but Harry kept arguing. I picked up a paper on the floor, and it said Daily Prophet. This must be the Wizard newspaper, I thought as I opened it up and read it. Gringotts break-in latest. Investigations continue into the break-in at Gringotts on July 30, first widely believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins today insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault that was searched had been emptied the same day. But we're not telling you what was in there, so keep your noses out if you know what's good for you, said a Gringotts spokesgoblin this afternoon. Hagrid, yelled Harry. That was the vault we emptied. I didn't realize that he was reading along with me, but apparently he was. Gears were spinning in my head as I wondered why Snape hated Harry so much. Nothing that day was better than tea with Hagrid. I was thinking as Harry, Ron, and I walked back to the castle. Classes at Hogwarts weren't going any better after that potions class. Apparently, we were going to learn how to fly soon, and we would be learning with the Slytherins. The last thing I want to do is make a fool of myself in front of Malfoy. Harry said that Thursday of our lessons. You won't, Ron said reassuringly. All his talk about Quidditch probably isn't true. It seemed as though all children from wizarding families cared about was Quidditch. I read about it, and it sounded interesting, but not enough to play it. Seamus, Ron, and Draco were only a nibble of the pie of people who talk about Quidditch. Dean likes soccer better, but the others don't understand it. SQ. The mail came in, and as usual, Harry and I never got any mail. Look, Gran's got me a remembrall, exclaimed Neville from the other side of the table. It glows red if you dash. He stopped as it turned red. If you forget something, he continued sadly. Draco snatched the remembrall out of his hand, and as if she was on cue, Professor McGonagall walked over. Is something wrong? She asked. Malfoy's got my remembrall, Professor, Neville said, trying to look brave. Just looking, Draco said, innocently as he gave the remembrall back. Hey, Evangeline, a voice behind me said. Weasleys, I replied. I motioned for them to sit down. What are you two getting at? You'd never come talk to me? Ron said with a questioning look. Of course we wouldn't want to come talk to you. We're here for Emma, George said, rolling his eyes. Me? I said, confused. Ron had said her at the same time. I rolled my eyes and said, wow, thanks, Ronald. Yes, you, yes, her, Fred continued. Why though? I questioned, still very confused. Want to help Nick something from Filch? George asked with a sparkle in his eyes. Of course, I said, excited. Wait, why her? Why not me? I'm your brother. Ron was still confused. Fred put his arm around me. You know, Ron, I seem to trust her more than you. Plus, you're pretty dull, he said in a sneering tone. Ron's face was red, and Fred looked back to me. 10 o'clock tonight in the common room. Be there, he said. Quickly after, they got up and left. Can't believe he said that, Ron said in shock. I can, I teased, smirking. Shut up, Em. He was red again. At 3:30, we walked down to the grounds to start our lessons. The Slytherins were already there and lined up next to the brooms. Madame Hooch, our teacher, was waiting there for us. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes that watched you like a hawk. She told us to stand by a broom and to say up. Up, I said with confidence. The broom rushed into my hand. Harry's had done the same thing, and sadly, so did Malfoy's. He caught me looking at him and smirked at me and winked. I shuddered and rolled my eyes. Now, when I blow this whistle, I want you to kick off from the ground and hover. Then lean forward and land. 3, 2. Before she blew it, Neville flew off and went up and up and up and up and down. He fell with a loud crack. We all ran over to him, and Madame Hooch lifted him up. Oh dear, broken wrist. If any of you get off the ground, I will have you out of here before you can say Quidditch, she threatened as she rushed to the hospital wing. Did you see his face, the big lump? Asked Malfoy as he started laughing. Shut up, Malfoy, I said. Oh. Sticking up for Longbottom, Never though you would fall for crybabies, Granger, said Pansy Parkinson. Look, it's that thing as Gran got him, Draco said, taking the remembrall. Give it here, Harry said. No, I think I'll leave it in a tree for him to find, Draco said, and flew up. Bit out of your reach, Potter? What about you, Granger? Scared for a little rule breaking? Not at all, Harry and I said as we flew up, disregarding my sister complaints. We flew up, and flying felt great. I loved the feeling of wind blowing in your hair as you flew. Through the wind. Give it here, Harry said, or I'll knock you off your broom, I added. All right, he said. He threw it, and I chased after it. It was quite easy. It was as if he passed it to me. I caught it and threw it behind my back to Harry. I turned back around and saw he caught it. Sadly, though, he dropped it. Immediately after he zoomed down and made a 50-yard drop and caught it. Got it, he yelled, and we both softly landed on the ground. All the Gryffindors cheered. Emma Granger and Harry Potter. McGonagall yelled as she walked onto the pitch. She started muttering and said, "Follow me," so we followed her. She led us to the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom and asked Quirrell if she could borrow wood. I thought wood was a beating stick that we're going to use on us. A big sixth year came out and said, "Yes, Professor?" Wood, I found you a new seeker and chaser, so that was how my flying lessons went and how I got on the Quidditch team. Seriously, Professor? I mean, after Alicia resigned, we need one, but they're first years, asked Wood. Apparently, his name was Oliver Wood, not just Wood. Absolutely Wood. They were fantastic. I've never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broom, Granger? What about you, Potter? She asked us. We both hung our head down and nodded. I guess we weren't going to be expelled. She caught that thing when it was speeding at 10 miles per hour and caught it. She threw it behind her back and had amazing aim, and Potter caught it. When he dropped it, Potter zoomed down and caught it after a 50-yard drop. Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it. Professor McGonagall said proudly, "Would looked like this was the best day of his life." You two ever seen a game of Quidditch? He asked us excitedly. Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team, McGonagall explained. She's just the build for a chaser too. He's just the build for a seeker. Wood looked like he was jumping up and down. We'll have to get them a decent broom, a clean sweep 7 or a Nimbus 2000, Wood said, analyzing us. I will ask Professor Dumbledore about it. Maybe we can bend the first-year rule. McGonagall said. Wait, so we're not punished? I asked. Not today, Miss Granger, McGonagall said with a small smile. You're joking. Ron exclaimed at dinner when we told him the news. Seeker? Chaser. First years never, but you must be the youngest player in Dash, a century. Yeah, Wood told us, Harry said beaming. Fred and George now came in the hall, spotted us, and walked over. Good job, they said in unison and in a low voice. We're on the team too, beaters. We haven't won since Charlie left. Fred said, you guys must be good. Wood was literally skipping when he told us. We have to go. Lee reckons that he's found a new passageway out of the school. See you at 10, he added, and walked away. Malfoy came up to us and said, you two having your last meals here? He sneered. You're much braver now that you have your cronies here with you, I shot back, gesturing to Crabbe and Goyle. I'd take on you any day, Granger. He said my name with disgust. How about tonight? Wizard's duel, just wands, no physical contact. That is, if your muggle parents told you what they are. Of course she does. I'm her second, who's yours? Ron said coolly. Malfoy thought for a little and said, Crabbe, midnight good? I'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. He gave us a smirk and walked off. I hope my business with Fred and George would be over by then. What is a wizard's duel, Ron? And why are you my second? I asked. The second is there to take over if you die. Ron explained. I instantly had a sick feeling in my stomach. But people usually only die in proper duels. You will just be able to shoot sparks at each other. Ron reassured me. What if I can't shoot any spells? I asked. Then punch him in the nose, Ron said, imitating a punch. Ahem, I heard behind us. It was Hermione. Hey, sis, I said, happily. She ignored me and said, I couldn't help but overhear what you said about Malfoy Dash. Bet you could, Ron muttered. You mustn't go about the school at night. You'll get Gryffindor in trouble. It's really quite selfish of you. I sat there dumbfounded. She was never this mean to me at home. Ron noticed I wasn't saying anything and said, and it's really none of your business. Goodbye. She left, and I felt tears brim my eyes. She never did this to me at home. I got up and ran to the common room. Once I got there, I started crying. I missed Mum and Dad. I thought that if Hermione was here with me, it would be better, but now even she isn't herself. It was 5 minutes to 10 when I finally spotted Fred and George descending the stairs. Where have you been? I asked in a semi-angry voice. We're not late, Evangeline, chill, Fred said, holding his hands up in surrender. Let's go. I have business at midnight, I said, tuning and starting to walk off. I felt a tug at my neck, and I saw that George grabbed my hood of my robe. "We need to give you some information first, Emma," he said cautiously. I questioned. "We're looking for a rustic piece of parchment. Really old and folded up. Thing is, you need to be very careful not to touch anything. Who knows what kind of jinxes are in there?" Fred explained. I nodded my head. "Got it. Now can we go?" I said rather impatiently. "After you, milady," George said, bowing and motioning the way to go. Fred followed. I giggled and left the common room. We tiptoed to his office as quickly as possible. It was dark. Lumos we did at once. I made sure not to touch anything and only used my wand. We cracked jokes while we looked so it would be more enjoyable after about 20 minutes. George found it. "Good job," I yelled. "What is it?" "Something that will prove very useful in getting out of the school," Fred said with a smirk. He opened the door for us to leave, and we left the room when we heard footsteps. "Go," I whispered. "He'll believe me being out, just go." They scrambled off, and I was 5 feet away from Filch. "Granger, what are you doing here at this hour?" he said, eyebrow raised. I looked around and saw the charms classroom was in the next hall over. I left my sister's book in the charms room. I was going to go get it, I explained in my most believable tone. He grunted and nodded. As I walked back to the common room, I realized I loved it. The rush of being in that position. I made it back, and the fat lady was still there to my surprise. "Pig snout," I said clearly, and the portrait swung open. I saw the twins run up super excited. "What he do?" George asked. I shrugged. "Nothing," I said simply. "Damn, Evangeline, you're lucky," Fred said. I laughed. "Good night, you guys." I smiled, tired as I went back up. Quickly, though, I remembered my duel and was not excited. It was 11:30. I got dressed and went to the common room where Ron and Harry were waiting for me. Another person was there too. Hermione. "I almost told your brother," she told Ron. "He would put a stop to this." We started through the portrait hole, and Hermione started lecturing us. I didn't care anymore. "Leave," I snapped. She looked taken aback. "Fine," she said. She started back towards the portrait, but the fat lady had gone off somewhere. "Now what am I going to do?" She groaned. "Shut up," I said. There was something moving. "Neville," I said. "Thank goodness I found you." "I couldn't remember the password," he said. "It's pig snout. It won't help now, though." The fat lady left. Harry told him. They said that they were coming with us, and Ron threatened them. We made our way to the trophy room and waited there for a while until we heard a voice. It was Filch. "Did you find someone, my sweet?" he asked Mrs. Norris. "This way," I mouthed. Everyone followed me. We went through this gallery of armor unnoticed until Neville tripped and made a big crash. "Run," Harry screamed. We sprinted through the hallways until we got to the charms classroom. It was miles away from the trophy room, so we were safe. "Malfoy tricked you," she snapped at me. "You know, funny enough, I worked that out for myself." "Thanks," I shot back. Suddenly, I heard something and Peeves came in. "Please, Peeves, don't give us away," I begged. Ron tried to hit Peeves and he bellowed, "Students out of bed." In the charms corridor. We started running until the end of the corridor again, and her Filch following us. "We're done for," said Ron. "Move over," Hermione said, annoyed. "Aloha, Mora," she said, and the door unlocked. We went inside, and Neville started whimpering. Peeves started messing with Filch's brain, if he had one, and laughed. "What, Neville's?" I exclaimed. He was pulling on our robes. He pointed up, and we saw what he was so scared of. There in front of us was a 3-headed dog. It was huge. We had woken it up, and it was staring right at us. "Aowa!" We all screamed and ran out of the room. We ran and ran and ran until we got back to the common room. Pig snout, pig snout, pig snout, we exclaimed. She opened up and we ran inside the common room. What are they thinking, keeping a thing like that as a school? Ron said. You don't use your eyes, do you?
Didn't you see what it was standing on?
Hermione snapped. No, I was preoccupied with its heads. If you didn't notice, it had 3, I said, annoyed. She started going on about the dangers and went back in the common room. She has got to sort out her priorities, Ron said. I wonder what the dog was guarding and why. The first day, Ravenclaw sighed. I walked with the Ravenclaws to the first class I had with them, Charms. I was kind of the odd one out because everyone was staring at me, probably because I was that girl in 2 houses. Hello there, said this Chinese girl in Ravenclaw.
Hi.
What's your name? I asked, trying to make friends. She looked over her shoulder to a group of girls, and I knew instantly why she was here. I know why you're here. I started if your friends dared you to talk to me. Consider this talking. She nodded shyly. I'm Cho Chong. Hi, Cho. I'm Emma Granger, she finished. Everyone knows your name. Well, you and Harry Potter, of course. Her face instantly turned red. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I laughed. It's fine, I said. If you know me IRL, you know how much I say this. So, how is it being in 2 houses, I mean, she said. Fine, I replied, but it's kinda weird with all the staring and stuff. I paused to gesture to her friends, but overall, it's cool. Sorry, she apologized. I'll tell them to stop. No, it's okay. I reassured her, but it's easier for me and Harry that way, because whenever we hang out, we can blame the staring on the other person, she laughed. You know, most people say that you're mean, selfish, and just plain old bossy, but I think you're funny. Thanks, I said. Come on, I'll introduce you to my friends, she told me, gesturing to her friends. I nodded and walked over. Everyone, this is Emma Granger, Cho started. This is Marietta Edgecombe. I looked over to a pale, black-haired girl who looked a lot like Cho. One by one, she introduced me to all her friends, and I felt happy. By the time all this had finished, we had gotten to the Charms classroom, and we sat down. Today, class, we will be studying the levitation charm, Professor Flitwick said. He looked me, and I smiled at him. He blushed. I looked at Cho in confusion. He's really uncomfortable around girls, Cho explained. I nodded. Take out your wands, he commanded. There suddenly was a big whoosh, and everyone had their wands. Say the spell, then swish and flick. Wingardium Leviosa, his feathers started floating. Yes, Professor, we all chanted. Wingardium Leviosa, a Hufflepuff boy said, who was next to me. Wingardium Leviosa, I chanted, and my feathers started floating. Look here, everyone. Miss Granger's done it. 10 points to Ravenclaw, he said, excitedly. I smiled and Cho, and she gave a thumbs up. Once we were done, I ran out of the classroom and caught up to Cho. Nice job, she said. Thanks, I said, blushing. You got 10 points for Ravenclaw on your first day. Not many people have done that, she said. Well, I started, but I realized that I didn't know the password to the common room. Oh, we have to answer a riddle to get in, Che explained. The portrait said, take away my first letter, and I still sound the same. Take away my last letter, I still sound the same. Even take away my letter in the middle, I will still sound the same. I am a 5-letter word. What am I? I thought for less than a second, and got the answer, empties. I shouted. The portrait said, no one has ever gotten that one that fast, congrats, and she opened up. I stepped into the common room, and all I saw was an explosion of blue, white, and gray. We had a lot of classes after that, but nonetheless, my thought on my first night here, in Gryffindor Tower WS becoming proven. I loved Hogwarts. Day before Halloween with Gryffindors. What do you think it is? Asked Ron. We were talking about the package that Harry and Hagrid had taken out. I don't know, but it's either really valuable or really dangerous, I commented. Or both, Harry added. Well, let's see what we know about it. It is 2 inches long. That's it? I said, discouraged. Neither Hermione nor Neville wanted to know what the dog was guarding, and that was good. I didn't want my nosy sister involved. Hermione also refused to talk to any of us, so she wouldn't be involved. I couldn't even imagine Malfoy's face when he saw that we are still here. I smirked at the thought. What's so funny? Asked Ron, noticing my face. Nothing, I said. Eska. Haha, the morning's mail was coming and I saw Athena and Hedwig carrying huge packages with letters. Athena accurately dropped the package, as for Hedwig, not so much. The letter said, "Do not open parcel at table. It contains your new Nimbus 2000, but I don't want everybody knowing you've got a broomstick or they'll all want one. Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for your first training session. Professor McGonagall." We beamed. Wow, I've never even touched one of those, Ron said, as he basked in the glory. They left the hall quickly, wanting to unwrap the broomstick in private before their first class, but halfway across the entrance hall they found the way upstairs barred by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy seized the package from Harry and felt it. "That's a broomstick," he said, throwing it back to Harry with a mixture of jealousy and spite on his face. "You'll be in for it this time, Potter. First years aren't allowed them." Ron couldn't resist it. "It's not any old broomstick," he said. "It's a Nimbus 2000. What did you say you've got at home, Malfoy? A Comet 260? Ron grinned at Harry. "Comets look flashy, but they're not in the same league as the Nimbus." "What would you know about it, Weasley? You couldn't afford half the handle," Malfoy snapped back. "I suppose you and your brothers have to save up twig by twig." Before Ron could answer, Professor Flitwick appeared at Malfoy's elbow. "Not arguing, I hope, boys and girl," he squeaked, referring to me. "Granger's been sent a broomstick, Professor," said Malfoy quickly. Yes, that's right," said Professor Flitwick, beaming at me. "Professor McGonagall told me all about the special circumstances, Granger and Potter." "And what model are they?" "A Nimbus 2000, sir," I said, fighting not to laugh at the look of horror on Malfoy's face. "And it's really thanks to Malfoy here that we've got them," Harry added. We headed upstairs, smothering our laughter at Malfoy's obvious rage and confusion. "Well, it's true," he chortled as we reached the top of the marble staircase. "If he hadn't stolen Neville's Remembrall, I wouldn't be on the team." "So, I suppose you think that's a reward for breaking rules," came an angry voice from just behind us. Hermione was stomping up the stairs, looking disapprovingly at the package in our hands. "What do you want?" I groaned. "Yeah, I thought you weren't speaking to us," said Harry. "Yes, don't stop now," said Ron. "It's doing us so much good." I laughed, and Hermione looked like she was ashamed. Hermione marched away, with her nose in the air. "Good riddance," I said, glad she was gone. "Someone's mad at their sister," said Harry. "Shut up," I said, and shoved his arm. Harry and I had a lot of trouble keeping our minds on our lessons that day. It kept wandering up to the dormitory where our new broomsticks were lying under our beds, or straying off to the Quidditch field where we'd be learning to play that night. We bolted our dinner that evening without noticing what we were eating, and then rushed upstairs with Ron to unwrap the Nimbus 2000 at last. "Wow," Ron sighed, as the broomstick rolled onto the common room couch. Even I, who knew nothing about the different brooms, thought it looked wonderful. Sleek and shiny, with a mahogany handle, it had a long tail of neat, straight twigs and Nimbus 2000 written in gold near the top. As 7 o'clock drew nearer, Harry and I left the castle and set off in the dusk toward the Quidditch field. We'd never been inside the stadium before. Hundreds of seats were raised in stands around the field so that the spectators were high enough to see what was going on. At either end of the field were 3 golden poles with hoops on the end. They reminded Harry of the little plastic sticks Muggle children blew bubbles through, except that they were 50 feet high. When he told me this, I cracked up. Too eager to fly again to wait for wood, Harry mounted his broomstick and kicked off from the ground. He looked like he was having fun, so I joined him, and I realized that flying was amazing. "Hey, Potter, Granger, come downs." Oliver had arrived. He was carrying a large wooden crate under his arm. We landed next to him. "Very nice," said Wood, his eyes glinting. "I see what McGonagall meant. You two really are naturals. I'm just going to teach you the rules this evening, then you'll be joining team practice 3 times a week." He opened the crate. Inside were 4 different-sized balls. "Right," said Wood. "Now, Quidditch is easy enough to understand, even if it's not too easy to play. There are 7 players on each side. 3 of them are called chasers. That's you, Granger." 3 chasers. Harry and I repeated, as Wood took out a bright red ball about the size of a soccer ball. "This ball's called the quaffle," said Wood. "The chasers throw the quaffle to each other and try and get it through one of the hoops to score a goal. 10 points every time the quaffle goes through one of the hoops. Follow me? Granger, this is the only ball you have to focus on." I nodded, "Yes, sir." "The chasers throw the quaffle and put it through the hoops to score," Harry recited. "So, that's sort of like basketball on broomsticks with 6 hoops, isn't it?" "What's basketball?" said Wood curiously. "Never mind," I said quickly. "Now, there's another player on each side who's called the keeper. I'm keeper for Gryffindor. I have to fly around our hoops and stop the other team from scoring." 3 chasers, 1 keeper," said Harry, who was determined to remember it all. I wasn't reciting because I was a quick learner. "And they play with the quaffle." "Okay, got that. So, what are they for?" He pointed at the 3 balls left inside the box. "I'll show you now," said Wood. "Take this." He handed us a small club, a bit like a short baseball bat. "I'm going to show you what the bludgers do," Wood said. "These 2 are the bludgers." He showed us 2 identical balls, jet black and slightly smaller than the red quaffle. I noticed that they seemed to be straining to escape the straps holding them inside the box. "Stand back," Wood warned us. He bent down and freed one of the bludgers. At once, the black ball rose high in the air and then pelted straight at my face. I swung at it with the bat to stop it from breaking my nose and sent it zigzagging away into the air. It zoomed around their heads and then shot at Wood, who dived on top of it and managed to pin it to the ground. "See?" Wood panted, forcing the struggling bludger back into the crate and strapping it down safely. The bludgers rocket around, trying to knock players off their brooms. "That's why you have 2 beaters on each team. The Weasley twins are ours. It's their job to protect their side from the bludgers and try and knock them toward the other team. So, think you've got all that." 3 chasers try and score with the quaffle. The keeper guards the goalposts. The beaters keep the bludgers away from their team. Harry reeled off. "Very good," said Wood. Have the bludgers ever killed anyone?" Harry asked. "Never at Hogwarts. We've had a couple of broken jaws, but nothing worse than that. Now, the last member of the team is the Seeker. That's you, Potter. And you don't have to worry about the quaffle or the bludgers, unless they crack my head open. Don't worry. The Weasleys are more than a match for the bludgers. I mean, they're like a pair of human bludgers themselves." Wood reached into the crate and took out the 4th and last ball. Compared with the quaffle and the bludgers, it was tiny, about the size of a large walnut. It was bright gold and had little fluttering silver wings. "This," said Wood, "is the golden snitch, and it's the most important ball of the lot. It's very hard to catch because it's so fast and difficult to see. It's the Seeker's job to catch it. You've got to weave in and out of the chasers, beaters, bludgers, and quaffle to get it before the other team's seeker, because whichever seeker catches the snitch wins his team an extra 150 points, so they nearly always win. That's why seekers get fouled so much. A game of Quidditch only ends when the snitch is caught, so it can go on for ages. I think the record is 3 months. They had to keep bringing on substitutes so the players could get some sleep. That's a long while, I joked. Harry, you better not make our game that long, understand? Well, that's it. Any questions? Harry shook his head. He understood what he had to do all right. It was doing it that was going to be the problem. We won't practice with the snitch yet, said Wood, carefully shutting it back inside the crate. It's too dark. We might lose it. Let's try you out with a few of these. He pulled a bag of ordinary golf balls out of his pocket, and a few minutes later, he and Harry were up in the air, Wood throwing the golf balls as hard as he could in every direction for Harry to catch. Harry didn't miss a single one, and Wood was delighted. Granger, you will use the quaffle. Andy will try to stop you from getting in the goals. I didn't miss a single one either. After half an hour, night had really fallen, and we couldn't carry on. That Quidditch Cup will have our name on it this year, said Wood happily as they trudged back up to the castle. I wouldn't be surprised if you turn out better than Charlie Weasley and Alicia Spinnet. Charlie could have played for England if he didn't like dragons so much. As Harry and I walked back to the castle, I had another realization. I loved Hogwarts more than ever, even if my family didn't like me. On Halloween morning, we woke to the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in Charms that he thought that we were ready to start making objects fly, something we had all been dying to try since they'd seen him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. Professor Flitwick put the class into pairs to practice. I was with Lavender. Harry's partner was Seamus Finnegan, but Ron, however, was to be working with Hermione. It was hard to tell whether Ron or Hermione was angrier about this. She hadn't spoken to any of us since the day our broomsticks had arrived. Now, don't forget that nice wrist movement we've been practicing, squeaked Professor Flitwick, perched on top of his pile of books as usual. Swish and flick, remember, swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important, too. Never forget Wizard Baraffio, who said S instead of F and found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest. Wingardium Leviosa, I chanted, and my feather flew about 5 feet into the air. Lav clapped. I blushed. Thanks, Lav. Looky here, everyone. Miss Granger's done it. 10 points to Gryffindor, Flitwick said, happily. Other people, however, weren't having much luck. Harry and Seamus swished and flicked, but the feather they were supposed to be sending skyward just lay on the desktop. Seamus got so impatient that he prodded it with his wand and set fire to it. Harry had to put it out with his hat. Ron, at the next table, wasn't having much more luck. Wingardium Leviosa, he shouted, waving his long arms like a windmill. You're saying it wrong, I heard Hermione snap. It's Wingardium Leviosa. Make the gar nice and long. You do it then, if you're so clever, Ron snarled. Hermione rolled up the sleeves of her gown, flicked her wand, and said, Wingardium Leviosa. Their feather rose off the desk and hovered about 4 feet above their heads. Oh, well done, cried Professor Flitwick, clapping. Everyone see here, the other Miss Granger's done it. Ron was in a very bad mood by the end of the class. It's no wonder no one can stand her, he said to us as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. She's a nightmare, honestly. Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past him. It was Hermione. I saw her face and realized that she was in tears. You mean person, I cried to Ron. First of all, you shouldn't insult people. Second, you shouldn't insult them if they're right behind you. You are one mean person, Ronald Weasley. I ran off to find her. I followed her bushy hair until he made it to the bathrooms. "Hermione's?" I called out. I heard whimpering and sniffs. I went under the last sink in there and found Hermione. "Hey, sis," I whispered. "Leave," she screamed. "I'm not liked here, and you don't like me, so why are you here?" "Because you're my sister, and we have to be there for each other," I said. "Honestly, I thought I wasn't liked by you, and I thought no one would like me." "I'm sorry," she said. "I just want to be liked." We hugged, and that moment lasted for a long time. Third person POV. Harry and Ron watched Emma run off after Hermione, and they both felt guilt. Hermione nor Emma turned up for the next class, and they weren't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the Great Hall for the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. They also heard that Emma was crying as well. Ron looked still more awkward at this, but a moment later they had entered the Great Hall, where the Halloween decorations put Hermione out of their minds. As they entered November, the weather turned very cold. The mountains around the school became icy gray, and the lake like chilled steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost. Hagrid could be seen from the upstairs windows defrosting broomsticks on the Quidditch field, bundled up in a long moleskin overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and enormous beaverskin boots. The Quidditch season had begun. On Saturday, Harry and Emma would be playing in his first match after weeks of training, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they would move up into second place in the house championship. Hardly anyone had seen Harry nor Emma play because Wood had decided that, as their secret weapon, the two should be kept, well, secret. But the news that he was playing Seeker and that she was playing Chaser had leaked out somehow, and they didn't know which was worse, people telling them they'd be brilliant or people telling them they'd be running around underneath them holding a mattress. The only thing that would calm either of them down was a book called Quidditch Through the Ages. Hermione had given each of them a copy. Hermione had become a bit more relaxed about breaking rules since Harry, Ron, and her sister had saved her from the mountain troll, and she was much nicer for it. The day before Harry and Emma's first Quidditch match, the four of them were out in the freezing courtyard during break, and she had conjured them up a bright blue fire that could be carried around in a jam jar. They were standing with their backs to it, getting warm, when Snape crossed the yard. Harry noticed at once that Snape was limping. Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione moved closer together to block the fire from view. They were sure it wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eye. He limped over. He hadn't seen the fire, but he seemed to be looking for a reason to tell them off anyway. "What's that you've got there, Granger?" It was Quidditch Through the Ages. Emma showed him. "Library books are not to be taken outside the school," said Snape. "Give it to me." 5 points from Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. Nearby Ravenclaws looked at Emma with dirty look. "He's just made that rule up," Harry muttered angrily as Snape limped away. "Wonder what's wrong with his leg." "Dunno, but I hope it's really hurting him," said Emma bitterly. The Gryffindor common room was very noisy that evening. Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione sat together next to a window. Hermione was checking Harry's homework, and Emma's checking over Ron's. Hermione would never let them copy "How will you learn?" but Emma would. Emma felt restless. She wanted Quidditch Through the Ages back, to take her mind off her nerves about tomorrow. Why should she be afraid of Snape? Getting up, she told Ron, Hermione, and Harry she was going to ask Snape if she could have it back. "Better you than me," they said together, but Emma had an idea that Snape wouldn't refuse if there were other teachers listening. She made his way down to the staff room and knocked. There was no answer. She knocked again. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had left the book in there? It was worth a try. She pushed the door ajar and peered inside, and a horrible scene met her eyes. Snape and Filch were inside alone. Snape was holding his robes above his knees. One of his legs was bloody, and mangled. Filch was handing Snape bandages. "Blasted thing," Snape was saying. "How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all 3 heads at once?" Emma tried to shut the door quietly, but Granger. Snape's face was twisted with fury as he dropped his robes quickly to hide his leg. Emma gulped. "I just wondered if I could have my book back." "Get out."
Out.
Emma left before Snape could take any more points from Gryffindor. She sprinted back upstairs. "Did you get it?" Ron asked as Emma joined them. "What's the matter?" In a low whisper, Emma told them what she'd seen. "You know what this means," she finished breathlessly. "He tried to get past that 3-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when we saw him. He's after whatever it's guarding. And I'd bet my broomstick he let that troll in to make a diversion." Hermione's eyes were wide.
"No, he wouldn't," she said.
"I know he's not very nice, but he wouldn't try and steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe. Honestly, Hermione, you think all teachers are saints or something," snapped Ron. "I'm with them. I wouldn't put anything past Snape. But what's he after? What's that dog guarding?" Emma went to bed with her head buzzing with the same question. She tried to empty her mind. She needed to sleep. She had to. Harry and her had their first Quidditch match in a few hours, but the expression on Snape's face when Emma had seen his leg wasn't easy to forget. The next morning dawned very bright and cold. The Great Hall was full of the delicious smell of fried sausages and the cheerful chatter of everyone looking forward to a good Quidditch match. "You've got to eat some breakfast." "I don't want anything. Just a bit of toast," wheedled Hermione. "I'm not hungry." Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time, he'd be walking onto the field. "Harry, you need your strength," said Seamus Finnegan. "Seekers are always the ones who get clobbered by the other team." "Thanks, Seamus," said Harry, watching Seamus pile ketchup on his sausages. Emma slapped Seamus. "Seamus, don't scare him more," she scolded. Seamus scoffed. "So what? You're not scared?" he asked. She was silent after this. By 11 o'clock, the whole school seemed to be out in the stands around the Quidditch pitch. Many students had binoculars. The seats might be raised high in the air, but it was still difficult to see what was going on sometimes. Ron and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus, and Dean the West Ham fan up in the top row. As a surprise for Emma and Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Scabbers had ruined. It said Granger for goals and Potter for president, and Dean, who was good at drawing, had done a large Gryffindor lion underneath for Harry and a half Ravenclaw, half Gryffindor symbol for Emma. IT also said Granger for goals. Then Hermione had performed a tricky little charm so that the paint flashed different colors. Meanwhile, in the locker room, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into their scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be playing in green. Wood cleared his throat for silence. "Okay, men," he said. "And women," said Chaser Angelina Johnson. "And women," Wood agreed. "This is it. The big one," said Fred Weasley. "The one we've all been waiting for," said George. "We know Oliver's speech by heart," Fred told Harry. "We were on the team last year." "Shut up, you two," said Wood. "This is the best team Gryffindor's had in years. We're going to win." "I know it." He glared at them all as if to say, "Or else."
"Right.
"It's time. Good luck, all of you." Harry and Emma followed Fred and George out of the locker room and, hoping his knees weren't going to give way, walked onto the field to loud cheers. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the field waiting for the two teams, her broom in her hand. "Now, I want a nice fair game. All of you," she said, once they were all gathered around her. Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to the Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, a 6th year. Harry thought Flint looked as if he had some troll blood in him. "Mount your brooms, please." Harry clambered onto his Nimbus 2000, while Emma did the same. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her silver whistle. 15 brooms rose up, high into the air. They were off, and the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive, too. Jordan. Sorry, Professor. The Weasley twins' friend, Lee Jordan, was doing the commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. And she's really belting along up there. A neat pass to Emma Granger, new chaser, back to Johnson, and no, the Slytherins have taken the quaffle. Slytherin Captain Marcus Flint gains the quaffle, and off he goes, Flint flying like an eagle up there. He's going to SC, no. Stopped by an excellent move by Gryffindor keeper Wood, and the Gryffindors take the quaffle. That's chaser Katie Bell of Gryffindor there. Nice dive around Flint. Off up the field, and OUCH, that must have hurt. Hit in the back of the head by a bludger. Quaffle taken by the Slytherins. That's Adrian Pusey speeding off toward the goalposts, but he's blocked by a second bludger, sent his way by Fred or George Weasley. Can't tell which. Nice play by the Gryffindor beater anyway, and Granger back in possession of the quaffle. A clear field ahead, and off she goes. She's really flying, dodges a speeding bludger. The goalposts are ahead. Come on now. Emma, keeper Bletchley dives. Misses. Gryffindor score. Gryffindor cheers filled the cold air with howls and moans from the Slytherins. Emma felt better now that she had scored. Budge up there, move along. Hagrid. Ron and Hermione squeezed together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. Been watchin' for me, Hut, said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars around his neck, but it isn't the same as bein' in the crowd. No sign of the snitch yet, eh? Nope, said Ron. Harry hasn't had much to do yet. But, Hermione trailed off. Kept out of trouble, though. That's something, said Hagrid, raising his binoculars and peering skyward at the speck that was Harry. Way up above them, Harry was gliding over the game, squinting about for some sign of the snitch. This was part of his and Wood's game plan. Keep out of the way until you catch sight of the snitch, Wood had said. We don't want you attacked before you have to be. When Emma had scored, Harry had done a couple of loop-the-loops to let off his feelings. Now he was back to staring around for the snitch. Once he caught sight of a flash of gold, but it was just a reflection from one of the Weasleys' wristwatches, and once a bludger decided to come pelting his way, more like a cannonball than anything, but Harry dodged it, and Fred Weasley came chasing after it. All right there, Harry, he had time to yell as he beat the bludger furiously toward Marcus Flint. Slytherin in possession, Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Pusey ducks 2 bludgers, 2 Weasleys, and Chaser Granger, and speeds toward the— Wait a moment, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as Adrian Pusey dropped the quaffle, too busy looking over his shoulder at the flash of gold that had passed his left ear. Harry saw it. In a great rush of excitement, he dived downward after the streak of gold. Slytherin seeker Terrence Higgs had seen it, too. Neck and neck they hurtled toward the snitch. All the chasers seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing as they hung in midair to watch. Harry was faster than Higgs. He could see the little round ball. Wings fluttering, darting up ahead, he put on an extra spurt of speed. Wham! A roar of rage echoed from the Gryffindors below. Marcus Flint had blocked Harry on purpose, and Harry's broom spun off course, Harry holding on for dear life. Foul! Screamed the Gryffindors. Madame Hooch spoke angrily to Flint, and then ordered a free shot at the goal posts for Gryffindor. But in all the confusion, of course, the golden snitch had disappeared from sight again. Down in the stands, Dean Thomas was yelling, "Send him off, ref." Red card. What are you talking about, Dean? Said Ron. Red card, said Dean furiously. In soccer you get shown the red card, and you're out of the game. But this isn't soccer, Dean, Ron reminded him. Hagrid, however, was on Dean's side. They ought to change the rules. Flint could have knocked Harry out of the air. Lee Jordan was finding it difficult not to take sides. So, After that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating, Jordan, growled Professor McGonagall. I mean, after that open and revolting foul. Jordan, I'm warning you. All right. Flint nearly kills the Gryffindor Seeker, which could happen to anyone, I'm sure, so a penalty to Gryffindor, taken by Belle, who puts it away, no trouble, and we continue play. Gryffindor still in possession. It was as Harry dodged another bludger, which went spinning dangerously past his head, that it happened. His broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped the broom tightly with both his hands and knees. He'd never felt anything like that. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off. But Nimbus 2000s did not suddenly decide to buck their riders off. Harry tried to turn back toward the Gryffindor goalposts. He had half a mind to ask Wood to call timeout, and then he realized that his broom was completely out of his control. He couldn't turn it. He couldn't direct it at all. It was zigzagging through the air, and every now and then making violent swishing movements that almost unseated him. Lee was still commentating. Slytherin in possession, Flint with the quaffle, passes Granger, passes Bell, hit hard in the face by a bludger, hope it broke his nose. Only joking, Professor, Slytherin score a no. The Slytherins were cheering. No one seemed to have noticed that Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher, away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. "To know what Harry thinks he's doing?" Hagrid mumbled. He stared through his binoculars. "If I didn't know better, I'd say he'd lost control of his broom, but he can't have..." Suddenly, people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. Then the whole crowd gasped. Harry's broom had given a wild jerk and Harry swung off it. He was now dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him? Seamus whispered. "Can't have," Hagrid said, his voice shaking. "Can't nothing interfere with a broomstick except powerful dark magic. No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started looking frantically at the crowd. "What are you doing?" moaned Ron, gray-faced. "I knew it," Hermione gasped. "Snape, look." Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering nonstop under his breath. Emma noticed too, but she didn't do anything because she would ruin chances for Gryffindor. "He's doing something, jinxing the broom," said Hermione. "What should we do?" "Leave it to me." Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard, it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd was on its feet, watching, terrified, as the Weasleys flew up to try and pull Harry safely onto one of their brooms. But it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. "Come on, Hermione," Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across to the stand where Snape stood and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few well-chosen words. Bright blue flames shot from her wand onto the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what had happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back onto his broom. "Neville, you can look," Ron said. Neville had been sobbing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding toward the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hand to his mouth as though he was about to be sick. He hit the field on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. "I've got the snitch," he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. Emma cheered her mouth off. She had won her first Quidditch game. He didn't catch it. He nearly swallowed it. Flint was still howling 20 minutes later, but it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the results. Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Harry heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea back in Hagrid's hut, with Ron and Hermione. "It was Snape," Ron was explaining. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering. He wouldn't take his eyes off you." "Rubbish," said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. "Why would Snape do something like that?" Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione looked at one another, wondering what to tell him. Emma decided on the truth. "I found out something about him," she told Hagrid. "He tried to get past that 3-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever it's guarding." Hagrid dropped the teapot. "How do you know about Fluffy?" he said. "Fluffy's? Yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie, haha Hades, I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the—" "Yes," said Harry eagerly. "Now, don't ask me any more," said Hagrid gruffly. "That's top secret, that is." "But Snape's trying to steal it," Emma replied. "Rubbish," said Hagrid again. "Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He'd do nothing of the sort." "So why did he just try and kill Harry?" cried Hermione. The afternoon's events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. "I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid. I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him." "I'm tellin' ya, you're wrong," said Hagrid hotly. "I don't know why Harry's broom acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try and kill a student. Now, listen to me, all 4 of ya, you're meddlin' in things that don't concern ya. It's dangerous. You forget that dog, and you forget what it's guardin'. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel." "Uh-huh," said Harry. "So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there?" Emma smirked. "Thanks, Hagrid." Hagrid looked furious with himself. Third-person POV. Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs so that they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver mail had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor Common Room and the Great Hall had roaring fires, the drafty corridors had become icy and a bitter wind rattled the windows in the classrooms. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons, where their breath rose in a mist before them and they kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. "I do feel so sorry," said Draco Malfoy, one potions class, "for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Emma had so much anger in her that she just wanted to straight up punch Malfoy for being the foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach that he was. POA reference. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that the Slytherins had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he'd realized that nobody found this funny, because they were all so impressed at the way Harry had managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come around the week before, making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying, too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. Emma had wanted to stay, but their parents wanted them home. When they left the dungeons at the end of potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. 2 enormous feet sticking out at the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "Nah, I'm all right, thanks, Ron." "You sure?" asked Emma. "Nob," Hagrid replied. "Would you mind moving out of the way?" Came Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts, I suppose. That hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family's used to." Emma dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. "Granger." Emma let go of the front of Malfoy's robes. "She was provoked, Professor Snape," said Hagrid, sticking his huge, hairy face out from behind the tree. Malfoy was insulting Ron's family. "Be that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rules, Hagrid," said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor, Granger, and be grateful it isn't more. "Move along, all of you." Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Emma, grinding her teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days, I'll get him." "I hate them both," said Harry, Malfoy and Snape. "Come on, cheer up, it's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. "Tell ya what, come with me and see the Great Hall. Looks a treat." So the 3 of them followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with the Christmas decorations. Hagrid, the last tree, put it in the far corner, would you?" The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no less than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. "How many days you got left until your holidays?" Hagrid asked. "Just 1, said Hermione. Emma nodded. "And that reminds me, Harry, Ron, Emma, we've got half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library." "Oh yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden bubbles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them over the branches of the new tree. Emma rolled her eyes. "Boys. So easily distracted." "The library," said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays? Bit keen, aren't ya?" "Oh, we're not working," Ron told him brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I've told ya, drop it. It's nothing to you what that dog's garden. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is, that's all," said Emma. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the troubles," Harry added. "We must have been through hundreds of books already and we can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I've read his name somewhere." "I'm saying nothing," said Hagrid flatly. "Just have to find out for ourselves then," said Ron, and they left Hagrid looking disgruntled and hurried off to the library. They had indeed been searching books for Flamel's name ever since Hagrid had let it slip, because how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't in great wizards of the 20th century or notable magical names of our time. He was missing, too, from important modern magical discoveries and a study of recent developments in wizardry. And then, of course, there was the sheer size of the library. Tens of thousands of books, thousands of shelves, hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list of subjects and titles she had decided to search, while Ron strode off down a row of books and started pulling them off the shelves at random. Harry and Emma wandered over to the restricted section. They had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there. Unfortunately, you needed a specially signed note from one of the teachers to look in any of the restricted books, and they knew they'd never get one. These were the books containing powerful dark magic never taught at Hogwarts, and only read by older students studying advanced defense against the dark arts. "What are you looking for, boy and girl?" "Nothing," said Harry. Madame Pants, the librarian, brandished a feather duster at him. "You'd better get out then."
"Go on out."
"All right," Em exclaimed, exasperated. He, Ron, Emma, and Hermione had already agreed they'd better not ask Madame Pants where they could find Flamel. They were sure she'd be able to tell them, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry and Emma waited outside in the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but they weren't very hopeful. They had been looking for 2 weeks, but as they only had odd moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising they'd found nothing. What they really needed was a nice long search without Madame Pants breathing down their necks. 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined them, shaking their heads. They went off to lunch. "You'll keep looking while I'm away, won't you?" said Hermione. "And send me an owl if you find anything. And you could ask your parents if they know who Flamel is," said Ron to Emma and Hermione. "It'd be safe to ask them." "Very safe, as they're both dentists," said Hermione. Emma and Hermione were leaving. Emma's POV. "Bye, you two," yelled Harry and Ron, as Hermione and I were leaving in the night bus. It was hard to let go Hogwarts, but seeing as we had to, it was all right. "Wow, this term was fast," I breathed. "Yeah, everything went by so quickly," Hermione nodded. I thought of something and laughed. "What is it?" Hermione asked, scared. "It probably went quickly for you because you were studying the whole time," I joked. She laughed too. "And oh," she exclaimed. "What else were you doing?" I asked. "I was with you," she said. "Yeah, and what were you doing with us?" I asked.
She sighed.
"Doing homework or studying, see," I told her. We looked at each other in silence until we burst out laughing. The ride went like this until we got back to London. I smiled as I ran to Mum and Dad. It was good to be home.
"Em,
wake up. It's Christmas," shouted Hermione Christmas morning. She also just happened to shout it in my ear. The excitement didn't disappear, nonetheless. I woke up instantly, squealing. As I said before, I treat holidays like I'm a 5-year-old, even though I'm actually 11. As most kids would just run downstairs in their pajamas, me and Hermione were different. We had to look good before others could see us. I got up and went to the Jack and Jill bathroom that Hermione and I shared. I wasn't in the mood to take a shower, so I just changed into a short-sleeved shirt that said "Muggles Beware." I had gotten it at Madame Malkin's. She said that I had an eye for fashion when I first went there, so she led me to the back and showed me some clothes I might want to buy. The shirt was in there. I also put on some cream leggings, and Hermione put on a shirt that was baby blue with black leggings. I smiled. "What is it, Em?" asked Hermione. "Since it is like 6 o'clock and Mom and Dad aren't up, I think we can wear some makeup." I respond, a smirk appearing on my face. She smirked back. "I like this version of you," I told her, commenting on the more devilish side. "Me too," she responded. "It's new. That dialogue was a reference to the Land of Stories BTW. You should read it, it's good." I nodded and put on my fuzzy socks so I wouldn't make as much of a noise when we went downstairs. Hermione did the same. We tiptoed downstairs when Hermione knocked over a plant in the kitchen. "What are you doing?" I mouthed. "Sorry," she mouthed back. Luckily, Mum and Dad were heavy sleepers. If you screamed through a megaphone in their ears, they wouldn't notice. We easily got into Mum's bathroom, and we instantly searched her drawers. "Do you want me to do you?" I suddenly asked Hermione. What do you mean? What do you mean? Well, I said, sheepishly, Lav has been teaching me how to apply makeup, and I wanted to do you. She chuckled. Fine, she said in a fake mad voice. I looked inside of the drawers and found what I was looking for, moisturizer. I applied it on her face, and it instantly felt smooth. I put on some tan eyeshadow to blend in with her eyes and hair. Then I put on eyeliner and mascara and all that good stuff. Rummaging through the stuff, I found a rosy pink tinted chapstick. It said, "To you from you-know-who. I love you. This chapstick will smell like whatever attracts you. I hope you will smell me." I smelled it. I smelled Hogwarts. I also smelled the boys' dormitory in Gryffindor.
Phew.
I would fall in love with the Gryffindor at least. I also started smelling pranks that the twins use. Probably because I love pranks. I put the chapstick on Hermione's lips, and I said voila. She looked at herself in the mirror and said, "Wow, now for your hair," I announced, getting the hairbrush. She sighed. "All right," she muttered. I brushed the hair, but it was too frizzy, so I just put a headband in. "Your turn," she announced. I tried to fight back, but it just didn't work. She got me down on the chair and started putting makeup on me. A cream eyeshadow, eyeliner, mascara, and some tinted chapstick was all she put, but I looked great. The cream eyeshadow went perfectly with my leggings and my jade green and aquamarine kaleidoscope eyes. She went to my hair next, and she did a messy side braid to my long, dark brown wavy hair. She also pulled out some baby hairs. "Ahem," said a voice behind us. I turned to see Mom and Dad in their pajamas, staring at us. We wanted to be pretties?" I said, uncertainly. Suddenly, I laughed. Everyone looked to me like I was deranged, but soon they were laughing too. "Let them be Jean," said Dad. "Yeah, Jean," Hermione told Mom. Mom sighed. We went outside to our Christmas tree and saw many packages under it. The first, wrapped in blue, was a brand new black hoodie that said, "Emma Granger, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry," in white letters. "Thank you, Mom." I squealed. "You are very welcome," she told me. The next one was from Dad. It was a gold locket with blue gems. "Dumbledore told us your house," he explained, "gold for Gryffindor and blue for Ravenclaw." All I could do was hug him. Hermione had gotten me a book, of course. It was Hogwarts, a history. "Thanks, Hermione," I exclaimed. She smiled. I got candy from Ron and a sweater that was turquoise with a E in the middle from Mrs. Weasley. There was a note. "Ron has told me all about you, dear. I would love to meet you. Mrs. Weasley." I smiled. I had gotten Hermione some books, Dad a new watch, Mom some more makeup, and Ron got some candy. I had gotten the twins some test tubes and science stuff because I wanted to see what pranks they could make with science and magic together. I got Harry a practice snitch. IT only flew away 2 feet or so, but I thought he would like it. After we opened presents, I sent thank you notes with Athena and my family, and I sang Christmas carols. Honestly, I couldn't have asked for a better Christmas. Emma's POV. "Hermione, we're here," I exclaimed as I saw Hogwarts in the distance. "No, we're not," she corrected. "We're close," I playfully hit her. "You know what I mean," I replied, giggling. She laughed. "It'll be cool seeing the guys again," I told her, sitting down. She sighed. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I think they won't like me anymore," she said. "They've always liked you." "Hermione, that's not true," I murmured softly. She whimpered. I stroked her softly. Once we had gotten back to Hogwarts, Ron and Harry engulfed us in a hug, and I was happy to accept it. "Hello there, you two," said 2 familiar voices. Before I could react, I got hugged by the twins. "I missed you guys too," I told them once they pulled away. "Do you like your Christmas present?" I asked them. "Like it. We Love.
It.
Okay, stop talking like that, I commanded. It's confusing. Sorry, George said. Our deepest condolences, madam, said Fred. I laughed. I was good to be back. Third-person POV. They had almost given up hope of ever finding Flammel in a library book, even though Emma was still sure she'd read the name somewhere. Once term had started, they were back to skimming through books for 10 minutes during their breaks. Harry and Emma had even less time than the other two, because Quidditch practice had started again. Wood was working the team harder than ever. Even the endless rain that had replaced the snow couldn't dampen his spirits. The Weasleys complained that Wood was becoming a fanatic, but Harry was on Wood's side. If they won their next match against Hufflepuff, they would overtake Slytherin in the House Championship for the first time in 7 years. Quite apart from wanting to win, Harry found that he had fewer nightmares when he was tired out after training. Emma complained with the Weasleys. Then, during one particularly wet and muddy practice session, Wood gave the team a bit of bad news. He'd just gotten very angry with the Weasleys and Emma, who kept dive-bombing each other and pretending to fall off their brooms. Will you stop messing around? He yelled. That's exactly the sort of thing that'll lose us the match. Snape's refereeing this time, and he'll be looking for any excuse to knock points off Gryffindor. George Weasley really did fall off his broom at these words. Emma cracked up. Snape's refereeing? He spluttered through a mouthful of mud. When's he ever refereed a Quidditch match? He's not going to be fair, if we might overtake Slytherin. The rest of the team landed next to George to complain, too. It's not my fault, said Wood. We just got to make sure we play a clean game, so Snape hasn't got an excuse to pick on us. The rest of the team hung back to talk to one another as usual at the end of practice, but Harry and Emma headed straight back to the Gryffindor common room, where they found Ron and Hermione playing chess. Chess was the only thing Hermione ever lost at, something Harry, Emma, and Ron thought was very good for her. Don't talk to me for a moment, said Ron when Harry sat down next to him. I need to concentrate. He caught sight of Emma's face. What's the matter with you? You look terrible. Speaking quietly so that no one else would hear, Harry told the others about Snape's sudden, sinister desire to be a Quidditch referee. Don't play, said Hermione at once.
Say you're ill, said Ron.
Pretend to break your leg, Hermione suggested. Really break your leg, said Ron. I can't, said Harry. There isn't a reserve seeker. If I back out, Gryffindor can't play at all. Emma nodded. At that moment, Neville toppled into the common room. How he had managed to climb through the portrait hole was anyone's guess, because his legs had been stuck together with what they recognized at once as the leglocker curse. He must have had to bunny hop all the way up to Gryffindor Tower. Everyone fell over laughing except Hermione, who leapt up and performed the counter curse. Neville's legs sprang apart, and he got to his feet, trembling. What happened? Hermione asked him, leading him over to sit with Harry and Ron. Malfoy, said Neville shakily. I met him outside the library. He said he'd been looking for someone to practice that on. Go to Professor McGonagall. Hermione urged Neville. Report him. Neville shook his head. I don't want more trouble, he mumbled. You've got to stand up to him, Neville, said Emma. He's used to walking all over people, but that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. There's no need to tell me I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that. Neville choked out. Emma felt in the pocket of her robes and pulled out a chocolate frog, the very last one from the box Harry had given her for Christmas. She gave it to Neville, who looked as though he might cry. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Emma said. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinking Slytherin. Neville's lips twitched in a weak smile as he unwrapped the frog. Thanks, Em. I think I'll go to bed. You want the card. You collect them, don't you? As Neville walked away, Emma looked at the famous wizard card. Dumbledore again, she said. He was the first one I ever. She gasped. She stared at the back of the card. Then he looked up at Harry, Ron, and Hermione. I've found him, she whispered. I've found Flammel. I told you I'd read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Hermione jumped to her feet. She hadn't looked so excited since they'd gotten back the marks for their very first piece of homework. Stay there, she said, and she sprinted up the stairs to the girls' dormitories. Harry and Ron barely had time to exchange mystified looks before she was dashing back, an enormous old book in her arms. I never thought to look in here, she whispered excitedly. I got this out of the library weeks ago for a bit of light reading. Light, said Ron. Hermione gave him a dirty look, and he shut up. She started flipping through the pages. At last she found what she was looking for. I knew it. I knew it. Are we allowed to speak yet? Said Ron grumpily. Hermione ignored him. Nicholas Flamel, she whispered dramatically, is the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Stone. This didn't have quite the effect she'd expected, except for Emma. She gasped. The what? Said Harry and Ron. Oh, honestly, don't you two read? Hermione asked. No, they don't, said Emma. She pushed the book toward them, and Harry and Ron read. The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the Sorcerer's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Sorcerer's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Perenelle, 658. See, said Emma, when Harry and Ron had finished. The dog must be guarding Flamel's Sorcerer's Stone. I bet he asked Dumbledore to keep it safe for him, because they're friends and he knew someone was after it. That's why he wanted the stone moved out of Gringotts. A stone that makes gold and stops you from ever dying, said Harry. No wonder Snape's after it. Anyone would want it. And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in that study of recent developments in wizardry, said Ron. He's not exactly recent if he's 665, is he? Emma laughed. Emma's POV. The game wasn't too bad. Harry caught the snitch faster than I've seen anyone catch it. We won. As Harry and I were walking back from the locker room, reminiscing on the Snape memories, we saw Snape. We both looked at each other, and we instantly understood. We got back on our brooms and followed him to the Forbidden Forest. As he walked, I realized that he was walking toward something, or rather, someone. It was Quirrell. You don't know why you wanted T to meet here, of all places, Severus. Oh, I thought we'd keep this private, said Snape, his voice icy. Students aren't supposed to know about the Sorcerer's Stone, after all. Harry and I leaned forward. Quirrell was mumbling something. Snape interrupted him. Have you found out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's yet? But Severus, You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell, said Snape, taking a step toward him. I don't know what you know perfectly well what I mean. An owl hooted loudly, and I nearly fell out of the tree we were in. I steadied himself in time to hear Snape say, Your little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting, but I don't. Very well, Snape cut in. We'll have another little chat soon, when you've had time to think things over and decided where your loyalties lie. Harry threw his cloak over our heads, and we strode out of the clearing. I couldn't believe he had gotten one. It was almost dark now, but I could see Quirrell, standing quite still, as though he was petrified. Harry, Where have you been? Hermione squeaked. We won. You won. We won, shouted Ron, thumping Harry and I on the back. And I gave Malfoy a black eye, and Neville tried to take on Crabbe and Goyle single-handed. He's still out cold, but Madame Pomfrey says he'll be all right. Talk about showing Slytherin. I've waiting for you in the common room. We're having a party. Fred and George stole some cakes and stuff from the kitchens. Never mind that now, said Harry breathlessly. Let's find an empty room. You wait till you hear this. We made sure Peeves wasn't inside before shutting the door behind us. Then we told them what we'd seen and heard. So we were right. It is the Sorcerer's Stone, and Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fluffy, and he said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus. I reckon there are other things guarding the stone apart from Fluffy. Loads of enchantments, probably, and Quirrell would have done some anti-dark arts spell that Snape needs to break through, I said. So you mean the stone's only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape, said Hermione in alarm. It'll be gone by next Tuesday, said Ron. I chuckle, but nodded in response. Third-person POV. Quirrell, however, must have been braver than they'd thought. In the weeks that followed, he did seem to be getting paler and thinner, but it didn't look as though he'd cracked yet. Every time they passed the third-floor corridor, Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione would press their ears to the door to check that Fluffy was still growling inside. Snape was sweeping about in his usual bad temper, which surely meant that the stone was still safe. Whenever Harry passed Quirrell these days, he gave him an encouraging sort of smile, and Ron had started telling people off for laughing at Quirrell's stutter. Hermione and Emma, however, had more on her mind than the Sorcerer's Stone. They had started drawing up study schedules and color-coding all her notes. Harry and Ron wouldn't have minded, but they kept nagging them to do the same. Hermione, the exams are ages away. 10 weeks, Emma snapped. That's not ages. That's like a second to Nicholas Flamel. But we're not 600 years old, Ron reminded her. Anyway, what are you studying for? You already know it's an A. What am I studying for? Are you crazy? You realize we need to pass these exams to get into the second year? They're very important. I should have started studying a month ago. I don't know what's gotten into me. Unfortunately, the teachers seem to be thinking along the same lines as Hermione and Emma. They piled so much homework on them that the Easter holidays weren't nearly as much fun as the Christmas ones. It was hard to relax with Hermione or Emma next to you reciting the 12 uses of dragon's blood or practicing wand movements. Moaning and yawning, Harry and Ron spent most of their free time in the library with them, trying to get through all their extra work. I'll never remember this, Ron burst out one afternoon, throwing down his quill and looking longingly out of the library window. It was the first really fine day they'd had in months. The sky was a clear, forget-me-not blue, and there was a feeling in the air of summer coming. Harry, who was looking up, didn't he, in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi, didn't look up until he heard Emma say, Hagrid, what are you doing in the libraries? Hagrid shuffled into view, hiding something behind his back. He looked very out of place in his moleskin overcoat. Just lookin', he said, in a shifty voice that got their interest at once. And what are you lot up ter? He looked suddenly suspicious. You're not still lookin' fair Nicholas Flamel, are ya? Oh, we found out who he is ages ago, said Ron impressively. And we know what that dog's guarding. It's a sorcerer's ST. SHHHH. Hagrid looked around quickly to see if anyone was listening. Don, go shoutin' about it. What's the matter with yes? There are a few things we wanted to ask you. As a matter of fact, said Harry, about what's guarding the stone apart from Fluffy. SHHHH, said Hagrid again. Listen, come and see me later. I'm not promisin' I'll tell you anything. Mind, but don't go rabbiting about it in here. Students aren't supposed to know. They'll think I've told ya.
See you later, then, said Harry.
Hagrid shuffled off. What was he hiding behind his back? Said Hermione thoughtfully. Do you think it had anything to do with a stone? I'm going to see what section he was in, said Emma. She came back a minute later with a pile of books in her arms and slammed them down on the table. Dragons, she whispered. Hagrid was looking up stuff about dragons. Look at these. Dragon species of Great Britain and Ireland. From Egg to Inferno, a Dragon Keeper's Guide. Hagrid's always wanted a dragon. He told me so the first time I ever met him, said Harry. But it's against our laws, said Ron. Dragon breeding was outlawed by the Warlocks Convention of 1709. Everyone knows that. It's hard to stop Muggles from noticing us if we're keeping dragons in the back garden. Anyway, you can't tame dragons. It's dangerous. You should see the burns Charlie's got off wild ones in Romania. But there aren't wild dragons in Britain, said Harry. Of course there are, said Hermione, rolling her eyes. Common Welsh green and Hebridean blacks. The Ministry of Magic has a job. Hushing them up, I can tell you. Our kind have to keep putting spells on Muggles who've spotted them, to make them forget. So, what on earth's Hagrid up to? Said Emma. When they knocked on the door of the gamekeeper's hut an hour later, they were surprised to see that all the curtains were closed. Hagrid called, "Who is it?" before he let them in, and then shut the door quickly behind them. It was stifling hot inside. Even though it was such a warm day, there was a blazing fire in the grate. Hagrid made them tea and offered them stoat sandwiches, which they refused. So, ya wanted to ask me something? Yes, said Harry. There was no point beating around the bush. We were wondering if you could tell us what's guarding the Sorcerer's Stone apart from Fluffy. Hagrid frowned at him. Oh, course I can't, he said. Number 1, I don't know myself. Number 2, ya know too much already, so I wouldn't tell ya if I could. That stone's here for a good reason. It was almost stolen out of Gringotts. I suppose Yevie worked that out and all. Beats me how ya even know, Abu. Fluffy. Oh, come on, Hagrid. You might not want to tell us, but you do know. You know everything that goes on round here, said Emma, in a warm, flattering voice. Hagrid's beard twitched, and they could tell he was smiling. We only wondered who had done the guarding, really. Emma went on. We wondered who Dumbledore had trusted enough to help him, apart from you. Hagrid's chest swelled at these last words. Harry and Ron beamed at Emma. Well, I don't suppose it could hurt to tell ya that. Let's see. He borrowed Fluffy from me. Then the teachers did enchantments. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall. He ticked them off on his fingers. Professor Quirrell and Dumbledore himself did something. Oh, course. Hang on, I've forgotten someone. Oh yeah, Professor Snape. Snape? Asked Ron. Yeah, you're not still on Abu, that are ya? Look, Snape helped protect the stone. He's not about to steal it. Harry knew Ron, Emma, and Hermione were thinking the same as he was. If Snape had been in on protecting the stone, it must have been easy to find out how the other teachers had guarded it. He probably knew everything, except, it seemed, Quirrell's spell and how to get past Fluffy. You're the only one who knows how to get past Fluffy. Aren't you? Hagrid, said Harry anxiously. And you wouldn't tell anyone, would you? Not even one of the teachers? Not a soul knows except me and Dumbledore, said Hagrid proudly. Well, that's something, Emma muttered to the others. Hagrid, can we have a window open? I'm boiling. Can't, Emma, sorry, said Hagrid. Harry noticed him glance at the fire. Harry looked at it too. Hagrid, what's that? Harry asked, but he already knew what it was. In the very heart of the fire, underneath the kettle, was a huge black egg. Ah, said Hagrid, fiddling nervously with his beard. That's, Where did you get it, Hagrid? Said Ron, crouching over the fire to get a closer look at the egg. It must have cost you a fortune. Won it, said Hagrid. Last night. I was down in the village having a few drinks and got into a game, cards with a stranger. Think he was quite glad to get rid of it, to be honest. "But what are you going to do with it when it's hatched?" said Hermione. "Well, I've been doing some reading," said Hagrid, pulling a large book from under his pillow. "Got this out of the library. Dragon breeding for pleasure and profit. It's a bit out of date, old course, but it's all in here. Keep the egg in the fire, 'cause their mothers breathe on IMC. And when it hatches, feed it on a bucket o' brandy mixed with chicken blood every half hour. And see here how to recognize different eggs. What I got, there's a Norwegian Ridgeback. They're rare, them." He looked very pleased with himself, but Emma didn't. "Hagrid, you live in a wooden house," she said. But Hagrid wasn't listening. He was humming merrily as he stoked the fire. So now they had something else to worry about. What might happen to Hagrid if anyone found out he was hiding an illegal dragon in his hut? "Wonder what it's like to have a peaceful life," Ron sighed, as evening after evening they struggled through all the extra homework they were getting. Hermione and Emma had now started making study schedules for Harry and Ron, too. It was driving them nuts. Then, one breakfast time, Hedwig and Athena brought Harry and Emma another note from Hagrid. He had written only 2 words: "It's hatching." Ron wanted to skip herbology and go straight down to the hut. Hermione wouldn't hear of it. Even Emma wanted to skip. "Hermione, how many times in our lives are we going to see a dragon hatching?" Emma nagged. "We've got lessons. We'll get into trouble. And that's nothing to what Hagrid's going to be in when someone finds out what he's doing." "Shut up," Harry whispered. Malfoy was only a few feet away, and he had stopped dead to listen. How much had he heard? Harry didn't like the look on Malfoy's face at all. Ron and Hermione argued all the way to herbology, and in the end, Hermione agreed to run down to Hagrid's with the other 3 during morning break. When the bell sounded from the castle at the end of their lesson, the 4 of them dropped their trowels at once and hurried through the grounds to the edge of the forest. Hagrid greeted them, looking flushed and excited. "It's nearly out." He ushered them inside. The egg was lying on the table. There were deep cracks in it. Something was moving inside. A funny clicking noise was coming from it. They all drew their chairs up to the table and watched with bated breath. All at once there was a scraping noise, and the egg split open. The baby dragon flopped onto the table. It wasn't exactly pretty. Harry thought it looked like a crumpled black umbrella. Its spiny wings were huge compared to its skinny jet body. It had a long snout with wide nostrils, the stubs of horns, and bulging orange eyes. It sneezed. A couple of sparks flew out of its snout. "Isn't he beautiful?" Hagrid murmured. He reached out a hand to stroke the dragon's head. It snapped at his fingers, showing pointed fangs. "Bless him. Look, he knows his mommy," said Hagrid. "Hagrid," said Emma, "how fast do Norwegian Ridgebacks grow, exactly?" Hagrid was about to answer when the color suddenly drained from his face. He leapt to his feet and ran to the window. "What's the matter?" "Someone was looking through the gap in the curtains. It's a kid. He's running back up to the school." Emma bolted to the door and looked out. Even at a distance, there was no mistaking him. Malfoy had seen the dragon. Something about the smile lurking on Malfoy's face during the next week made Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione very nervous. They spent most of their free time in Hagrid's darkened hut, trying to reason with him. "Just let him go," Harry urged. "Set him free." "I can't," said Hagrid. "He's too little. He'd die." They looked at the dragon. It had grown 3 times in length in just a week. Smoke kept furling out of its nostrils. Hagrid hadn't been doing his gamekeeping duties because the dragon was keeping him so busy. There were empty brandy bottles and chicken feathers all over the floor. "I've decided to call him Norbert," said Hagrid, looking at the dragon with misty eyes.
"He really knows me now, watch."
"Norbert? Norbert? Where's Mommy?" "He's lost his marbles," Ron muttered in Harry's ear. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, give it 2 weeks and Norbert's going to be as long as your house. Malfoy could go to Dumbledore at any moment. Hagrid bit his lip. I know I can't keep him forever, but I can't just dump him. I can't. Emma suddenly turned to Ron.
Charlie, she said.
You're losing it too, said Ron. I'm Ron, remember? No, Charlie, your brother, Charlie. In Romania, studying dragons. We could send Norbert to him. Charlie can take care of him and then put him back in the wild. Brilliant, said Ron. How about it, Hagrid? And in the end, Hagrid agreed that they could send an owl to Charlie to ask him. The following week dragged by. Wednesday night found Hermione, Emma, and Harry sitting alone in the common room, long after everyone else had gone to bed. The clock on the wall had just chimed midnight when the portrait hole burst open. Ron appeared out of nowhere as he pulled off Harry's invisibility cloak. He had been down at Hagrid's hut, helping him feed Norbert, who was now eating dead rats by the crate. It bit me, he said, showing them his hand, which was wrapped in a bloody handkerchief. I'm not going to be able to hold a quill for a week. I tell you, that dragon's the most horrible animal I've ever met, but the way Hagrid goes on about it, you'd think it was a fluffy little bunny rabbit. When it bit me, he told me off for frightening it. And when I left, he was singing it a lullaby. There was a tap on the dark window. It's Athena, said Emma, hurrying to let her in. She'll have Charlie's answers. The 4 of them put their heads together to read the note. Dear Ron, how are you? Thanks for the letter. I'd be glad to take the Norwegian Ridge back, but it won't be easy getting him here. I think the best thing will be to send him over with some friends of mine who are coming to visit me next week. Trouble is, they mustn't be seen carrying an illegal dragon. Could you get the Ridgeback up the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take him away while it's still dark. Send me an answer as soon as possible.
Love.
Charlie. They looked at one another. We've got Harry's invisibility cloak, said Emma. It shouldn't be too difficult. I think the cloak's big enough to cover 3 of us and Norbert. It was a mark of how bad the last week had been that the other 2 agreed with him. Anything to get rid of Norbert and Malfoy. There was a hitch. By the next morning, Ron's bitten hand had swollen to twice its usual size. He didn't know whether it was safe to go to Madame Pomfrey. Would she recognize a dragon bite? By the afternoon, though, he had no choice. The cut had turned a nasty shade of green. It looked as if Norbert's fangs were poisonous. Emma, Harry, and Hermione rushed up to the hospital wing at the end of the day to find Ron in a terrible state in bed. It's not just my hand, he whispered, although that feels like it's about to fall off. Malfoy told Madame Pomfrey he wanted to borrow one of my books, so he could come and have a good laugh at me. He kept threatening to tell her what really bit me. I've told her it was a dog, but I don't think she believes me. I shouldn't have hit him at the Quidditch match. That's why he's doing this. Harry, Emma, and Hermione tried to calm Ron down. It'll all be over at midnight on Saturday, said Hermione. But this didn't soothe Ron at all. On the contrary, he sat bolt upright and broke into a sweat. Midnight on Saturday, he said in a hoarse voice. Oh no. I've just remembered. Charlie's letter was in that book Malfoy took. He's going to know we're getting rid of Norbert. Harry and Hermione didn't get a chance to answer. Madame Pomfrey came over at that moment and made them leave, saying Ron needed sleep. It's too late to change the plan now, Emma told Hermione. We haven't got time to send Charlie another owl, and this could be our only chance to get rid of Norbert. We'll have to risk it. And we have got the invisibility cloak. Malfoy doesn't know about that. They found Fong, the boarhound, sitting outside with a bandaged tail when they went to tell Hagrid, who opened a window to talk to them. I won't let you in, he puffed. Norbert's at a tricky stage, nothing I can't handle. When they told him about Charlie's letter, his eyes filled with tears, although that might have been because Norbert had just bitten him on the leg.
Arg.
It's all right, he only got my boot, just playing. He's only a baby after all. The baby banged its tail on the wall, making the windows rattle. Harry, Emma, and Hermione walked back to the castle feeling Saturday couldn't come quickly enough. They would have felt sorry for Hagrid when the time came for him to say goodbye to Norbert if they hadn't been so worried about what they had to do. It was a very dark, cloudy night, and they were a bit late arriving at Hagrid's hut because they'd had to wait for Peeves to get out of their way in the entrance hall, where he'd been playing tennis against the wall. Hagrid had Norbert packed and ready in a large crate. "He's got lots o' rats and some brandy for the journey," said Hagrid in a muffled voice. "And I've packed his teddy bear in case he gets lonely." From inside the crate came ripping noises that sounded to Harry as though the teddy was having his head torn off. "Bye-bye, Norbert," Hagrid sobbed as Harry and Hermione covered the crate with the invisibility cloak and stepped underneath it themselves. "Mommy will never forget you." How they managed to get the crate back up to the castle, they never knew. Midnight ticked nearer as they heaved Norbert up the marble staircase in the entrance hall and along the dark corridors. Up another staircase, then another. Even one of Harry's shortcuts didn't make the work much easier. Nearly there, Harry panted as they reached the corridor beneath the tallest tower. Then a sudden movement ahead of them made them almost drop the crate. Forgetting that they were already invisible, they shrank into the shadows, staring at the dark outlines of two people grappling with each other 10 feet away. A lamp flared. Professor McGonagall, in a tartan bathrobe and a hairnet, had Malfoy by the ear. "Detention," she shouted. "And 20 points from Slytherin, wandering around in the middle of the night. How dare you?" "You don't understand, Professor. Harry Potter's coming. He's got a dragon." "What utter rubbish. How dare you tell such lies? Come on, I shall see Professor Snape about you, Malfoy." The steep spiral staircase up to the top of the tower seemed the easiest thing in the world after that. Not until they'd stepped out into the cold night air did they throw off the cloak, glad to be able to breathe properly again. Hermione did a sort of jig. "Malfoy's got detention. I could sing." "Don't," Harry advised her. Chuckling about Malfoy, they waited, Norbert thrashing about in his crate. About 10 minutes later, four broomsticks came swooping down out of the darkness. Charlie's friends were a cheery lot. They showed Harry and Hermione the harness they'd rigged up, so they could suspend Norbert between them. They all helped buckle Norbert safely into it, and then Harry and Hermione shook hands with the others and thanked them very much. At last, Norbert was gone. They slipped back down the spiral staircase, their hearts as light as their hands, now that Norbert was off them. No more dragon, Malfoy in detention. What could spoil their happiness? The answer to that was waiting at the foot of the stairs. As they stepped into the corridor, Filch's face loomed suddenly out of the darkness. Well, he whispered. "We are in trouble." They'd left the invisibility cloak on top of the tower. Third-person POV. Things couldn't have been worse. Filch took them down to Professor McGonagall's study on the first floor, where they sat and waited without saying a word to each other. Hermione and Emma were trembling. Excuses, alibis, and wild cover-up stories chased each other around Emma's brain, each more feeble than the last. She couldn't see how they were going to get out of trouble this time. They were cornered. How could they have been so stupid as to forget the cloak? There was no reason on earth that Professor McGonagall would accept for their being out of bed and creeping around the school in the dead of night, let alone being up the tallest astronomy tower, which was out of bounds except for classes. Add Norbert and the invisibility cloak, and they might as well be packing their bags already. Had Emma thought that things couldn't have been worse? She was wrong. When Professor McGonagall appeared, she was leading Neville.
"Emma."
Neville burst out the moment he saw the other three. "I was trying to find you to warn you," I heard Malfoy saying he was going to catch you. He said you had a drag. Emma shook her head violently to shut Neville up, but Professor McGonagall had seen. She looked more likely to breathe fire than Norbert as she towered over the three of them. I would never have believed it of any of you. Mr. Filch says you were up in the astronomy tower. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Explain yourselves. It was the first time Hermione had ever failed to answer a teacher's question. She was staring at her slippers, as still as a statue. I think I've got a good idea of what's been going on, said Professor McGonagall. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. You fed Draco Malfoy some cock-and-bull story about a dragon, trying to get him out of bed and into trouble. I've already caught him. I suppose you think it's funny that Longbottom here heard the story and believed it, too? Emma caught Neville's eye and tried to tell him without words that this wasn't true, because Neville was looking stunned and hurt. Poor, blundering Neville. Emma knew what it must have cost him to try and find them in the dark, to warn them. I'm disgusted, said Professor McGonagall. 4 students out of bed in one night. I've never heard of such a thing before. You, Miss Granger, both of you, I thought you had more sense. As for you, Mr. Potter, I thought Gryffindor meant more to you than this. All 4 of you will receive detentions. Yes, you too, Mr. Longbottom. Nothing gives you the right to walk around school at night, especially these days. It's very dangerous, and 50 points will be taken from Gryffindor. 50? Harry gasped. They would lose the lead he'd won in the last Quidditch match. 50 points each, said Professor McGonagall, breathing heavily through her long, pointed nose. Professor, please. You can't. Don't tell me what I can and can't do, Potter. Now get back to bed. All of you. I've never been more ashamed of Gryffindor students. A 200 points lost. That put Gryffindor in last place. In one night, they'd ruined any chance Gryffindor had had for the House Cup. Emma felt as though the bottom had dropped out of her stomach. How could they ever make up for this? None of them didn't sleep all night. What would happen when the rest of Gryffindor found out what they'd done? At first, Gryffindors passing the giant hourglasses that recorded the house points the next day thought there'd been a mistake. How could they suddenly have 150 points fewer than yesterday? And then the story started to spread. Harry Potter, the famous Harry Potter, their hero of 2 Quidditch matches, and Emma Granger, the smart, athletic wonder, had lost them all those points, them and a couple of other stupid first years. From being one of the most popular and admired people at the school, Harry was suddenly the most hated. Even Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs turned on him, because everyone had been longing to see Slytherin lose the House Cup. Everywhere Harry went, people pointed and didn't trouble to lower their voices as they insulted him. Slytherins, on the other hand, clapped as he walked past them, whistling and cheering. Thanks, Potter. We owe you one. Emma was hated by all Gryffindors, and even her Ravenclaw friends turned on her. Only Ron stood by them. They'll all forget this in a few weeks. Fred and George have lost loads of points in all the time they've been here, and people still like them. They've never lost 200 points in one go, though, have they? Said Harry miserably. Well, no, Ron admitted. It was a bit late to repair the damage, but Emma swore to herself not to meddle in things that weren't her business from now on. She'd had it with sneaking around and spying. She felt so ashamed of herself that he went to Wood and offered to resign from the Quidditch team. Resign? Wood thundered. What good'll that do? How are we going to get any points back if we can't win at Quidditch? But even Quidditch had lost its fun. The rest of the team wouldn't speak to Harry during practice, and if they had to speak about him, they called him the Seeker. Same thing happened to Emma. They called her the Mini Chaser. Hermione and Neville were suffering, too. They didn't have as bad a time as Harry and Emma because they weren't as well known, but nobody would speak to them, either. Hermione had stopped drawing attention to herself in class, keeping her head down and working in silence. Harry was almost glad that the exams weren't far away. All the studying he had to do kept his mind off his misery. He, Ron, Emma, and Hermione kept to themselves, working late into the night, trying to remember the ingredients in complicated potions, learn charms and spells by heart, memorize the dates of magical discoveries and goblin rebellions. Then, about a week before the exams were due to start, Emma's new resolution not to interfere in anything that didn't concern her was put to an unexpected test. Walking back from the library on her own one afternoon, she heard somebody whimpering from a classroom up ahead. As she drew closer, she heard Quirrell's voice. "No, no, not again, please." It sounded as though someone was threatening him. Emma moved closer. All right, she heard Quirrell sob. Next second, Quirrell came hurrying out of the classroom, straightening his turban. He was pale and looked as though he was about to cry. He strode out of sight. Emma didn't think Quirrell had even noticed her. She waited until Quirrell's footsteps had disappeared, then peered into the classroom. It was empty, but a door stood ajar at the other end. Emma was halfway toward it before she remembered what she'd promised himself about not meddling. All the same, she'd have gambled 12 Sorcerer's Stones that Snape had just left the room, and from what Emma had just heard, Snape would be walking with a new spring in his step. Quirrell seemed to have given in at last. Emma went back to the library, where Hermione was testing Ron and Harry on astronomy. Emma told them what she'd heard. "Snape's done it then," said Ron. "If Quirrell's told him how to break his anti-dark force spell." "There's still Fluffy, though," said Hermione. "Maybe Snape's found out how to get past him without asking Hagrid," said Emma, looking up at the thousands of books surrounding them. "I bet there's a book somewhere in here telling you how to get past a giant three-headed dog. So what do we do?" The light of adventure was kindling again in Emma's eyes, but Hermione answered, "Go to Dumbledore. That's what we should have done ages ago. If we try anything ourselves, we'll be thrown out for sure." "But we've got no proof," said Harry. "Quirrell's too scared to back us up. Snape's only got to say he doesn't know how the troll got in at Halloween, and that he was nowhere near the 3rd floor. Who do you think they'll believe, him or us? It's not exactly a secret we hate him. Dumbledore'll think we made it up to get him sacked. Filch wouldn't help us if his life depended on it. He's too friendly with Snape, and the more students get thrown out, the better he'll think. And don't forget, we're not supposed to know about the stone or Fluffy. That'll take a lot of explaining." Hermione looked convinced, but Ron didn't. "If we just do a bit of poking around." "No," said Emma flatly. "We've done enough poking around." She pulled a map of Jupiter toward her and started to learn the names of its moons. The following morning, notes were delivered to Harry, Hermione, Emma, and Neville at the breakfast table. They were all the same. "Your detention will take place at 11 o'clock tonight. Meet Mr. Filch in the entrance hall. Professor McGonagall." Emma had forgotten they still had detentions to do in the furor over the points they'd lost. She half expected Hermione to complain that this was a whole night of studying lost, but Hermione didn't say a word. Like Emma, she felt they deserved what they'd got. At 11 o'clock that night, they said goodbye to Ron in the common room and went down to the entrance hall with Neville. Filch was already there, and so was Malfoy. Harry and Emma had also forgotten that Malfoy had gotten a detention, too. Hermione rolled her eyes. "Follow me," said Filch, lighting a lamp and leading them outside. "I bet you'll think twice about breaking a school rule again, won't you?" He said, leering at them. "Oh yes, hard work and pain are the best teachers if you ask me. It's just a pity they let the old punishments die out. Hang you by your wrists from the ceiling for a few days. I've got the chains still in my office. Keep 'em well oiled in case they're ever needed. Right, off we go, and don't think of running off. Now, it'll be worse for you if you do." They marched off across the dark grounds. Neville kept sniffing. Harry wondered what their punishment was going to be. It must be something really horrible, or Filch wouldn't be sounding so delighted. The moon was bright, but clouds scudding across it kept throwing them into darkness. Ahead, Emma could see the lighted windows of Hagrid's hut. Then they heard a distant shout. "Is that you, Filch? Hurry up. I want to get started." Emma's heart rose. If they were going to be working with Hagrid, it wouldn't be so bad. Her relief must have showed in her face, because Filch said, "I suppose you think you'll be enjoying yourself with that oaf? Well, think again, girl. It's into the forest you're going, and I'm much mistaken if you'll all come out in one piece." At this, Neville let out a little moan, and Malfoy stopped dead in his tracks. "The forest," he repeated, and he didn't sound quite as cool as usual. "We can't go in there at night. There's all sorts of things in there. Werewolves, I heard." Neville clutched the sleeve of Harry's robe and made a choking noise. "That's your problem, isn't it?" said Filch, his voice cracking with glee. "Should have thought of them werewolves before you got in trouble, shouldn't you?" Hagrid came striding toward them out of the dark, Fong at his heel. He was carrying his large crossbow, and a quiver of arrows hung over his shoulder. "About time," he said. "I've been waiting fair half an hour already." "All right, Harry, Emma, Hermione." "I shouldn't be too friendly to them, Hagrid," said Filch coldly. "They're here to be punished, after all." "That's why you're late, is it?" said Hagrid, frowning at Filch. "Been lecturing them, eh? Snot place to do that. You've done your bit. I'll take over from here." "I'll be back at dawn," said Filch. "For what's left of them," he added nastily, and he turned and started back toward the castle, his lamp bobbing away in the darkness. Malfoy now turned to Hagrid. "I'm not going in that forest," he said, and Harry was pleased to hear the note of panic in his voice. "Yeah, if you want to stay at Hogwarts," said Hagrid fiercely. "You've done wrong, and now you've got to pay for it. But this is servant stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we'd be copying lines or something. If my father knew I was doing this, he'd—" "Tell you that's how it is at Hogwarts," Hagrid growled.
Copying lines.
"What good's that to anyone? You'll do summit useful, or you'll get out. If you think your father'd rather you were expelled, then get back off to the castle and pack."
Go on.
Malfoy didn't move. He looked at Hagrid furiously, but then dropped his gaze. "Right then," said Hagrid. "Now listen carefully, 'cause it's dangerous what we're gonna do tonight, and I don't want no one taking risks. Follow me over here a moment." He led them to the very edge of the forest. Holding his lamp up high, he pointed down a narrow, winding earth track that disappeared into the thick black trees. A light breeze lifted their hair as they looked into the forest. "Look there," said Hagrid. "See that stuff churning on the ground? Silvery stuff? That's unicorn blood. There's a unicorn in there been hurt badly by Summit. This is the second time in a week. I found one dead last Wednesday. We're gonna try and find the poor thing. We might have to put it out of its misery." "And what if whatever hurt the unicorn finds us first?" said Malfoy, unable to keep the fear out of his voice. "There's nothing that lives in the forest that'll hurt ya if you're with me or Fong," said Hagrid. "And keep to the path. Right now, we're gonna split into two parties and follow the trail in different directions. There's blood all over the place. It must have been staggerin' around since last night at least." "I want Fong," said Malfoy quickly, looking at Fong's long teeth. "All right, but I warn ya, he's a coward," said Hagrid. "So me, Harry, Emma, and Hermione'll go one way and Draco, Neville, and Fong'll go the other. Now, if any of us finds the unicorn, we'll send up green sparks, right? Get your wands out and practice now. That's it. And if anyone gets in trouble, send up red sparks, and we'll all come and find ya. So, be careful. Let's go." The forest was black and silent. A little way into it, they reached a fork in the earth path, and Harry, Emma, Hermione, and Hagrid took the left path, while Malfoy, Neville, and Fong took the right. They walked in silence, their eyes on the ground. Every now and then a ray of moonlight through the branches above lit a spot of silver-blue blood on the fallen leaves. Harry saw that Hagrid looked very worried. Could a werewolf be killing the unicorns? Emma asked. Not fast enough, said Hagrid. It's not easy to catch a unicorn. They're powerful magic creatures. I never knew one to be hurt before. They walked past a mossy tree stump. Emma could hear running water. There must be a stream somewhere close by. There were still spots of unicorn blood here, and they're along the winding path. You all right, Hermione? Hagrid whispered. Don't worry, it can't be gone far if it's this badly hurt, and then we'll be able to get behind that tree. Hagrid seized Harry, Emma, and Hermione and hoisted them off the path behind a towering oak. He pulled out an arrow and fitted it into his crossbow, raising it, ready to fire. The three of them listened. Something was slithering over dead leaves nearby. It sounded like a cloak trailing along the ground. Hagrid was squinting up the dark path, but after a few seconds, the sound faded away. I knew it, he murmured. There's someone in here that shouldn't be. A werewolf, Harry suggested. That wasn't no werewolf, and it wasn't no unicorn neither, said Hagrid grimly. Right, follow me, but careful, now. They walked more slowly, ears straining for the faintest sound. Suddenly, in a clearing ahead, something definitely moved. Who's there? Hagrid called. Show yourself, I'm armed. And into the clearing came, was it a man or a horse? To the waist, a man, with red hair and beard, but below that was a horse's gleaming chestnut body with a long, reddish tail. Harry, Emma, and Hermione's jaws dropped. Oh, it's you, Ronan, said Hagrid in relief. How are ya? He walked forward and shook the centaur's hand. Good evening to you, Hagrid, said Ronan. He had a deep, sorrowful voice. Were you going to shoot me? Can't be too careful, Ronan, said Hagrid, patting his crossbow. There's summat bad loose in this forest. This is Harry Potter, Emma Granger, and Hermione Granger, by the way. Students up at the school. And this is Ronan, you three. He's a centaur. We noticed, said Hermione faintly. Good evening, said Ronan. Students, are you? And do you learn much up at the schools? Harry started. A bit, said Emma timidly. A bit? Well, that's something. Ronan sighed. He flung back his head and stared at the sky. Mars is bright tonight. Yeah, said Hagrid, glancing up. Too. Listen, I'm glad we've run into ya, Ronan, 'cause there's a unicorn been hurt. You seen anything? Ronan didn't answer immediately. He stared unblinkingly upward, then sighed again. Always the innocent are the first victims, he said. So it has been for ages past, so it is now. Yeah, said Hagrid, but have you seen anything, Ronan? Anything unusuals? Mars is bright tonight, Ronan repeated, while Hagrid watched him impatiently. Unusually bright. Yeah, but I was meaning anything unusual a bit nearer home, said Hagrid. So ya haven't noticed anything strange? Yet again, Ronan took a while to answer. At last he said, the forest hides many secrets. A movement in the trees behind Ronan made Hagrid raise his bow again, but it was only a second centaur, black-haired and bodied and wilder-looking than Ronan. Hello, Bane, said Hagrid. All right. Good evening, Hagrid. I hope you are well? Well enough. Look, I've just been a skin, Ronan. You seen anything odd in here lately? There's a unicorn been injured. Would ya know anything about it? Bane walked over to stand next to Ronan. He looked skyward. Mars is bright tonight, he said simply. We've heard, said Hagrid grumpily. Well, if either of you do see anything, let me know, won't ya? We'll be off then. Harry, Emma, and Hermione followed him out of the clearing, staring over their shoulders at Ronan and Bane until the trees blocked their view. "Never," said Hagrid irritably. "Try and get a straight answer out of a centaur." Ruddy stargazers. "Not interested in any thins closer in the moon." "Are there many of them in here?" asked Hermione. "Oh, a fair few. Keep themselves to themselves mostly, but they're good enough about Tin and Bup if ever I want a word. They're deep-mind centaurs. They know things just on let on much." "Do you think that was a centaur we heard earlier?" said Harry. "Did that sound like hooves to you?" "Nah, if ya ask me. That was what's been killin' the unicorns. Never heard anything like it before." They walked on through the dense, dark trees. Emma kept looking nervously over her shoulder. She had the nasty feeling they were being watched. She was very glad they had Hagrid and his crossbow with them. They had just passed a bend in the path when Emma grabbed Hagrid's arm. "Hagrid."
Look.
"Red sparks. The others are in trouble," Emma cried. "You three wait here," Hagrid shouted. "Stay on the path. I'll come back for yes." They heard him crashing away through the undergrowth and stood looking at each other, very scared, until they couldn't hear anything but the rustling of leaves around them. "You don't think they've been hurt, do you?" whispered Hermione. "I don't care if Malfoy has, but if something's got Neville, it's our fault he's here in the first place." Emma sighed. The minutes dragged by. Their ears seemed sharper than usual. Emma seemed to be picking up every sigh of the wind, every cracking twig. What was going on? Where were the others? At last, a great crunching noise announced Hagrid's return. Malfoy, Neville, and Fawkes were with him. Hagrid was fuming. Malfoy, it seemed, had sneaked up behind Neville and grabbed him as a joke. Neville had panicked and sent up the sparks. "We'll be lucky to catch anything now, with the racket you two were making. Right, we're changing groups. Neville, you stay with me, and Hermione, Harry, and Emma, you go with Fawkes and this idiot." "I'm sorry," Hagrid added in a whisper to Harry and Emma, "but he'll have a harder time frightening you, and we've got to get this done." So Harry and Emma set off into the heart of the forest with Malfoy and Fawkes. They walked for nearly half an hour, deeper and deeper into the forest, until the path became almost impossible to follow because the trees were so thick. Emma thought the blood seemed to be getting thicker. There were splashes on the roots of a tree, as though the poor creature had been thrashing around in pain close by. Harry could see a clearing ahead through the tangled branches of an ancient oak. "Look," he murmured, holding out his arm to stop Malfoy. Something bright, white was gleaming on the ground. They inched closer. It was the unicorn, all right, and it was dead. Emma had never seen anything so beautiful and sad. Its long, slender legs were stuck out at odd angles where it had fallen, and its mane was spread pully white on the dark leaves. Harry had taken one step toward it when a slithering sound made him freeze where he stood. A bush on the edge of the clearing quivered. Then, out of the shadows, a hooded figure came crawling across the ground like some stalking beast. Harry, Emma, Malfoy, and Fawkes stood transfixed. The cloaked figure reached the unicorn, lowered its head over the wound in the animal's side, and began to drink its blood. Eowyn. Malfoy let out a terrible scream and bolted. So did Fawkes. The hooded figure raised its head and looked right at Harry. Unicorn blood was dribbling down its front. It got to its feet and came swiftly toward Harry. He couldn't move for fear. Then a pain like he'd never felt before pierced his head. It was as though his scar were on fire. Half blinded, he staggered backward. He heard hooves behind him, galloping, and something jumped clean over Harry, charging at the figure. Emma ran to Harry, touching his head. "Harry, are you all right?" she cried, shaking. The pain in Harry's head was so bad, he fell to his knees. It took a minute or two to pass. When he looked up, the figure had gone. It was just Emma, with a worried face. A centaur was standing over them, Not Ronan or Bane. This one looked younger. He had white blonde hair and a palomino body. "Are you all right?" said the centaur, pulling Harry and Emma to their feet. "Yes, thank you. What was that?" The centaur didn't answer. He had astonishingly blue eyes, like pale sapphires. He looked carefully at Harry, his eyes lingering on the scar that stood out, livid, on Harry's forehead.
"You are the Potter boy," he said.
"You had better get back to Hagrid. The forest is not safe at this time, especially for you. Can you ride? It will be quicker this way. My name is Firenze," he added, as he lowered himself onto his front legs so that Harry and Emma could clamber onto his back. There was suddenly a sound of more galloping from the other side of the clearing. Ronan and Bane came bursting through the trees, their flanks heaving and sweaty. "Firenze," Bane thundered. "What are you doing? You have a human on your back. Have you no shame? Are you a common mule?" "Do you realize who this is?" said Firenze. "This is the Potter boy. The quicker he leaves this forest, the better." Emma crossed her arms. It was as if she wasn't there. "What have you been telling him?" growled Bane. "Remember, Firenze, we are sworn not to set ourselves against the heavens. Have we not read what is to come in the movements of the planets?" Ronan pawed the ground nervously. "I'm sure Firenze thought he was acting for the best," he said in his gloomy voice. Bane kicked his back legs in anger. "For the best? What is that to do with us? Centaurs are concerned with what has been foretold. It is not our business to run around like donkeys after stray humans in our forest." Firenze suddenly reared onto his hind legs in anger, so that Harry had to grab his shoulders to stay on. "Do you not see that unicorn?" Firenze bellowed at Bane. "Do you not understand why it was killed? Or have the planets not let you in on that secret? I set myself against what is lurking in this forest, Bane, yes, with humans alongside me if I must," and Firenze whisked around. With Harry clutching on as best he could, they plunged off into the trees, leaving Ronan and Bane behind them. Harry nor Emma didn't have a clue what was going on. "Why's Bane so angry?" they asked. "What was that thing you saved us from, anyway?" Firenze slowed to a walk, warned Harry and Emma to keep their head bowed in case of low-hanging branches, but did not answer their question. They made their way through the trees in silence for so long that Harry thought Firenze didn't want to talk to him anymore. They were passing through a particularly dense patch of trees, however, when Firenze suddenly stopped. "Harry Potter, do you know what unicorn blood is used for?" "No," said Harry, startled by the odd question. "We've only used the horn and tail hair in potions. How about you, Emma Granger? Even among the centaurs, we have heard of your placement." Emma blushed and shook her head. "That is because it is a monstrous thing to slay a unicorn," said Firenze. "Only one who has nothing to lose and everything to gain would commit such a crime. The blood of a unicorn will keep you alive, even if you are an inch from death, but at a terrible price. You have slain something pure and defenseless to save yourself, and you will have but a half-life, a cursed life, from the moment the blood touches your lips." Emma stared at the back of Firenze's head, which was dappled silver in the moonlight. But who'd be that desperate, she wondered aloud. If you're going to be cursed forever, death's better, isn't it? "It is," Firenze agreed, "unless all you need is to stay alive long enough to drink something else, something that will bring you back to full strength and power, something that will mean you can never die. Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, do you know what is hidden in the school at this very moment?" "The Sorcerer's Stone. Of course, the elixir of life. But I don't understand who," Emma rambled. "Can you think of nobody who has waited many years to return to power, who has clung to life, awaiting their chance?" It was as though an iron fist had clenched suddenly around Emma's heart. Over the rustling of the trees, he seemed to hear once more what Hagrid had told him on the night they had met. "Some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion." Dunno if he had enough human left in him to die. Do you mean? Harry croaked. That was Valdash. Emma glared at him to shut him up. Harry.
Are
you all right? Hermione was running toward them down the path, Hagrid puffing along behind her. We're fine, said Harry, hardly knowing what he was saying. The unicorn's dead, Hagrid. It's in that clearing back there. This is where I leave you, Firenze murmured as Hagrid hurried off to examine the unicorn. You're safe now. Harry slid off his back. Good luck, Harry Potter and Emma Granger, said Firenze. The planets have been read wrongly before now, even by centaurs. I hope this is one of those times. He turned and cantered back into the depths of the forest, leaving Harry and Emma shivering behind him. Ron had fallen asleep in the dark common room, waiting for them to return. He shouted something about Quidditch fouls when Emma roughly shook him awake. In a matter of seconds, though, he was wide-eyed as Harry and Emma began to tell him and Hermione what had happened in the forest. Harry couldn't sit down. He paced up and down in front of the fire. He was still shaking. Snape wants the stone for Voldemort, and Voldemort's waiting in the forest. And all this time we thought Snape just wanted to get rich. Stop saying the name, said Ron in a terrified whisper, as if he thought Voldemort could hear them. Harry wasn't listening. Firenze saved me, but he shouldn't have done so. Bane was furious. He was talking about interfering with what the planets say is going to happen. They must show that Voldemort's coming back. Bane thinks Firenze should have let Voldemort kill me. I suppose that's written in the stars as well. Will you stop saying the name? Ron hissed. So all I've got to wait for now is Snape to steal the stone. Harry went on feverishly. Then Voldemort will be able to come and finish me off. Well, I suppose Bane'll be happy. Hermione and Emma looked very frightened, but Emma had a word of comfort. Harry, everyone says Dumbledore's the only one you know who is ever afraid of with Dumbledore around. You know who won't touch you. Anyway, who says the centaurs are right? It sounds like fortune-telling to me, and Professor McGonagall says that's a very imprecise branch of magic. The sky had turned light before they stopped talking. They went to bed exhausted, their throats sore. But the night's surprises weren't over. The content you recognize is by Her Majesty, J.K. Rowling. I only own Emma and the Interhouse thing. J.K. In years to come, Emma would never quite remember how she had managed to get through her exams when she half expected who to come bursting through the door at any moment. Yet the days crept by, and there could be no doubt that Fluffy was still alive and well behind the locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classroom where they did their written papers. They had been given special, new quills for the exams, which had been bewitched with an anti-cheating spell. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one into his class to see if they could make a pineapple tap dance across a desk. Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into a snuff box. Points were given for how pretty the snuff box was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks while they tried to remember how to make a forgetfulness potion. Emma did the best she could, which was usually perfectly like her sister. Ron and Harry were decent. Scratch that, Harry was decent. Harry's scar kept hurting too. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves because Harry couldn't sleep. No one actually knew other than Harry himself. Ron, Emma, and Hermione didn't seem as worried about the stone as Harry. Their very last exam was history of magic. 1 hour of answering questions about batty old wizards who'd invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be free for a whole wonderful week until their exam results came out. When the ghost of Professor Binns told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchment, Emma couldn't help cheering with the rest, even though she wasn't supposed to. She saw Harry flash her a smile, and she smiled back. That was far easier than I thought it would be, said Emma and Hermione as they joined the crowds flocking out onto the sunny grounds. I needn't have learned about the 1637 Werewolf Code of Conduct or the uprising of Elfric the Eager. Hermione and Emma always liked to go through their exam papers afterward, but Ron said this made him feel ill, so they wandered down to the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid, which was basking in the warm shallows. Emma walked over to the twins. "Hey there," Fred said casually as he tickled the squid. Emma laughed.
"What and why are you doing that?" she asked.
The twins actually thought about it for a while. "Honestly, why do you have to ask us such hard questions?" Fred asked. Before Emma could respond, Fred picked her up. "Put me down." Emma squealed. Fred shook his head. He ran around with her on his back, and Emma screaming in delight. This was a good feeling. No more evil. Just Emma, Fred, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and other friends.
Splash.
Fred dropped Emma in the lake. There was one problem. She couldn't swim. She thrashed around, looking for something to grasp. Strong arms picked her up, and she saw it was Fred again. "Fred Weasley," she screamed, drenched. Everyone started laughing, and soon she was laughing too. Fred, George, and Lee ran away in fake fear. Emma laughed again and sat back down with her friends. "No more studying," Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass. "You could look more cheerful, Harry. We've got a week before we find out how badly we've done. There's no need to worry yet." Harry was rubbing his forehead. "I wish I knew what this means," he burst out angrily. "My scar keeps hurting. It's happened before, but never as often as this." "Go to Madame Pomfrey," Hermione suggested. "I'm not ill," said Harry. "I think it's a warning. It means danger's coming." "Harry, relax," Emma said. Worried, Hermione's right. The stone's safe as long as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we've never had any proof Snape found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off once. He's not going to try it again in a hurry. And Neville will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid lets Dumbledore down. Harry nodded. "I feel like I've forgotten something," Emma told them. Hermione said, "That's just the exams." "I woke up last night and was halfway through my Transfiguration notes before I remembered we'd done that one." Emma was quite sure the unsettled feeling didn't have anything to do with work, though. She watched an owl flutter toward the school across the bright blue sky, a note clamped in its mouth. Hagrid was the only one who ever sent her letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy, never, but... Emma suddenly jumped to her feet. "Where are you going?" said Ron sleepily. "I've just thought of something," said Emma. She had turned white. "We've got to go and see Hagrid now." "Why?" panted Hermione, hurrying to keep up. "Don't you think it's a bit odd," said Emma, scrambling up the grassy slope, "that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon, and a stranger turns up who just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs if it's against wizard law? Lucky they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't I see it before?" "What are you talking about?" said Harry, but Emma, sprinting across the grounds toward the forest, didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in an armchair outside his house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. "Hello," he said, smiling. "Finished your exams? Got time for a drink?" "Yes, please," said Ron, but Emma cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry. Hagrid, I've got to ask you something. You know that night you won Norbert? What did the stranger you were playing cards with look like?" Emma asked. "Dunno," said Hagrid casually. He wouldn't take his cloak off. He saw the four of them look stunned and raised his eyebrows. "It's not that unusual. You get a lot o' funny folk in the Hog's Head. That's the pub down in the village. Might have been a dragon dealer, mightn't he? I never saw his face. He kept his hood up." Hagrid told them. Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. "What did you talk to him about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all?" Might have come up, said Hagrid, frowning as he tried to remember. Yeah, he asked what I did, and I told him I was gamekeeper here. He asked a bit about the sort of creatures I took after, so I told him, and I said what I'd always really wanted was a dragon, and then I can't remember too well, 'cause he kept buying me drinks. Let's see. Yeah, then he said he had the dragon egg and we could play cards ferret if I wanted, but he had to be sure I could handle it. He didn't want it to go to any old home. So I told him, after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy. And did he seem interested in Fluffy? Emma asked, trying to keep her voice calm. She did notice that Harry had caught on. Well, yeah, how many three-headed dogs do you meet, even around Hogwarts? So I told him, Fluffy's a piece, so cake if you know how to calm him down. Just play him a bit o' music and he'll go straight off to sleep. Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. I shouldn't have told you that, he blurted out. Forget I said it. Hey, where are you going? Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione didn't speak to each other at all until they came to a halt in the entrance hall, which seemed very cold and gloomy after the grounds. We've got to go to Dumbledore, said Emma. Breaking the silence, Hagrid told that stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was either Snape or you-know-who under that cloak. It must have been easy. Once he got Hagrid drunk. I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Firenze might back us up if Bane doesn't stop him. Where's Dumbledore's office? They looked around, as if hoping to see a sign pointing them in the right direction. They had never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had been sent to see him. We'll just have to, Harry began, but a voice suddenly rang across the hall. What are you four doing inside? It was Professor McGonagall, carrying a large pile of books. We want to see Professor Dumbledore, said Hermione, rather bravely. See Professor Dumbledore? Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very fishy thing to want to do. Why? Emma swallowed. Now what? It's sort of secret, she said, but he wished at once she hadn't, because Professor McGonagall's nostrils flared. Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago, she said coldly. He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew off for London at once. He's gone, said Emma frantically. Now, Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Granger. He has many demands on his time. But this is important, Harry interrupted. Something you have to say is more important than the Ministry of Magic, Potters? Look, said Harry, throwing caution to the winds. Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone. Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. How do you know? She spluttered. Professor, I think I know that someone's going to try and steal the stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore, Emma explained. She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow, she said finally. I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured, no one can possibly steal it. It's too well protected. But Professor, Harry said. Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she said shortly. She bent down and gathered up the fallen books. I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine. But they didn't. It's tonight, said Emma once she was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. Snape's going through the trapdoor tonight. He's found out everything he needs, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent that note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore turns up. But what can we? Harry interrupted. Hermione gasped. Harry, Emma, and Ron wheeled round. Snape was standing there. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. They stared at him. You shouldn't be inside on a day like this, he said, with an odd, twisted smile. We were, Emma began, without any idea what she was going to say. You want to be more careful, said Snape. Hanging around like this, people will think you're up to something. And Gryffindor really can't afford to lose any more points, can it? Emma flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. "Be warned, Granger, any more nighttime wanderings and I will personally make sure you are expelled."
Good day to you.
He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out on the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. "Right, here's what we've got to do," he whispered urgently. "Two of us has got to keep an eye on Snape, wait outside the staff room, and follow him if he leaves it. One of you can stay there if he comes, and the other can come tell us. Hermione, Emma, you'd better do that." "Why us?" asked Emma. "It's obvious," said Ron. "You can pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know." He put on a high voice. "Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I got question 14B wrong." "Oh, shut up," said Hermione, smiling, but she agreed to go and watch out for Snape. So did Emma. "And we'd better stay outside the third-floor corridor," Harry told Ron. "Come on." But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time, she lost her temper. "I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments," she stormed. "Enough of this nonsense. If I hear you've come anywhere near here again, I'll take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house." Harry and Ron went back to the common room. Harry had just said, "At least Emma and Hermione are on Snape's tail," when the portrait of the fat lady swung open and Hermione and Emma came in. "I'm sorry, Harry," Hermione wailed. "Snape came out and asked me what I was doing, so I said I was waiting for Flitwick and Snape went to get him, and I've only just got away. I don't know where Snape went." "Well, that's it then, isn't it?" Harry said. The other three stared at him. He was pale, and his eyes were glittering. "I'm going out of here tonight, and I'm going to try and get to the stone first." "You're mad," said Ron. "You can't," said Emma. "After what McGonagall and Snape have said, you'll be expelled." "So what?" Harry shouted. "Don't you understand? If Snape gets hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it, or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore, can't you see? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the House Cup? If I get caught before I can get to the stone, well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have, because I'm never going over to the dark side. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two say is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember?" He glared at them. Everyone looked frightened, even Harry. "You're right, Harry," said Hermione in a small voice. "I'll use the invisibility cloak," said Harry. "It's just lucky I got it back." "But will it cover all four of us?" said Ron. All four of us." "Oh, come off it. You don't think we'd let you go alone?" Emma said, rolling her eyes. "Of course not," said Hermione briskly. "How do you think you'd get to the stone without us?" "I'd better go and took through my books. There might be something useful, but if we get caught, you two will be expelled, too," Harry said uncertainly. "Not if I can help it," said Hermione grimly. "Flitwick told me in secret that I got 112% on his exam. They're not throwing me out after that." After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Harry anymore, after all. This was the first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione and Emma were skimming through all their notes, hoping to come across one of the enchantments they were about to try to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk much. Both of them were thinking about what they were about to do. Slowly, the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. "Better get the cloak," Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs to their dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed it to use on Fluffy. He didn't feel much like singing. He ran back down to the common room. "We'd better put the cloak on here and make sure it covers all 4 of us. If Filch spots one of our feet wandering along on its own." "What are you doing?" said a voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who looked as though he'd been making another bid for freedom. "Nothing, Neville, nothing," said Harry, hurriedly putting the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. "You're going out again," he said. No, said Emma. "No, we're not. Why don't you go to bed, Neville's?" "You can't go out," said Neville. "You'll be caught again. Gryffindor will be in even more trouble." "You don't understand," said Ron. "This is important." But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. "I won't let you do it," he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you." "Neville," Emma exploded, "get away from that hole and don't be an idiot." "Don't you call me an idiot," said Neville. "I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. And you are the one who told me to stand up to people." "Yes, but not to us," said Ron in exasperation. "Neville, you don't know what you're doing." He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt out of sight. "Go on then, try and hit me," said Neville, raising his fists. "I'm ready." Harry turned to Emma and Hermione. "Do something," he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. "Neville," she said, "I'm really sorry about this." She raised her wand. "Petrificus totalis," she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. His legs sprang together. His whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood, and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws were jammed together, so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. "What have you done to him?" Harry whispered. "It's the full body bind," said Hermione miserably. "Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry." "We had to, Neville, no time to explain," said Harry. "Very sorry, Neville, but it's for your own good," Emma said, stepping over him. "You'll understand later, Neville," said Ron as they stepped over him and pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. At the foot of the first set of stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. "Oh, let's kick her, just this once," Ron whispered in Emma's ear, but Emma shook her head. As they climbed carefully around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase up to the 3rd floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. "Who's there?" he said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. "Know you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you ghouly or ghosty, or are we student beasties?" He rose up in the air and floated there, squinting at them. "Should call Filch. I should, if something's creeping around unseen." Harry had a sudden idea. "Peeves," he said, in a hoarse whisper, "the Bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible." Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. "So sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir," he said greasily. My mistake. I didn't see you, of course I didn't. You're invisible. Forgive old Peevesy his little joke, sir." "I have business here, Peeves," croaked Harry. "Stay away from this place tonight." "I will, sir, I most certainly will," said Peeves, rising up in the air again. "Hope your business goes well, Baron. I'll not bother you." And he scooted off. "Brilliant," Harry whispered Emma. Harry smiled. A few seconds later, They were there, outside the third-floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. "Well, there you are," Harry said quietly. Snape's already got past Fluffy. Seeing the open door somehow seemed to impress upon all four of them what was facing them. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other three. "If you want to go back, I won't blame you," he said. "You can take the cloak, I won't need it now."
"Don't be stupid," said Ron.
"We're coming," said Hermione. "Yeah, we won't leave you one this," said Emma. Harry pushed the door open. As the door creaked, low, rumbling growls met their ears. All three of the dogs' noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. "What's that at its feet?" Hermione whispered. "Looks like a harp," said Ron. "Snape must have left it there. It must wake up the moment you stop playing," said Harry. "Well, here goes." He put Hagrid's flute to his lips and blew. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew breath. Slowly, the dog's growls ceased. It tottered on its paws and fell to its knees. Then it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. "Keep playing," Ron warned Harry as they slipped out of the cloak and crept toward the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giant heads. "I think we'll be able to pull the door open," said Ron, peering over the dog's back. "Want to go first, Hermione?" "No, I don't." "I'll go," Emma said, firmly. She jumped down the trapdoor. "All right," Ron said. "What can you see?" Hermione said anxiously. "Nothing, just black. There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop. There is a soft landing, though. You will be safe, don't worry." "Am I right, aren't I?" Emma said, in her echoing voice. Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. "All right, Harry, you're next," said Ron, like he was on a game show. Harry handed the flute over. In the few seconds' silence, the dog growled and twitched, but the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into its deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of the bottom. Then he thought about Emma and how she was safe. So, he mustered up the courage to jump down. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by his fingertips. Then he looked up at Ron and said, "If anything happens to me or Emma, don't follow. Go straight to the Ollery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right?" "Right," said Ron. "See you in a minute, I hope,"
Harry said.
"Harry Potter, don't you say, hope you will be fine," Emma's screaming voice echoed. The voice startled Harry, and he fell down and down and down and down and flump. With a funny, muffled sort of thump, he landed on something soft. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. He saw Emma and she waved. "It's okay," he called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trapdoor. "It's a soft landing. You can jump." Ron followed right away. He landed, sprawled next to Emma. "What's this stuff?" were his first words. "Dunno, some sort of plant thing. I suppose it's here to break the fall." "Come on, Hermione," Emma said, encouragingly. The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Emma's other side. "We must be miles under the school," she said. "Lucky this plant thing's here, really," said Ron. "Lucky," shrieked Hermione. "Look at you." She leapt up and struggled toward a damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Emma had an idea as she was getting pulled into the plant. Emma had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys and Hermione fought to pull the plant off them, but the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. Stop moving, Emma ordered them. I know what this is. It's Devil's Snare.
Oh.
I'm so stupid, Hermione cried. Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help, snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. Shut up, I'm trying to remember how to kill it, said Hermione. Well, hurry up, I can't breathe, Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil's Snare, Devil's Snare. What did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the damp, Emma chanted. So light a fire. Harry choked. Yes, of course, but there's no wood. Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Emma facepalmed. Oh, right, said Hermione, and she whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flames she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were able to pull free. Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Em, said Harry as he joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron. And lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood. Honestly. Emma rolled her eyes. Honestly, Mione, I don't understand your good grades. Hermione blushed. This way, said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the only way forward. All they could hear apart from their footsteps was the gentle drip of water trickling down the walls. Can you hear something? Whispered Hermione. Harry listened. A soft rustling and clinking seemed to be coming from up ahead. Do you think it's a ghost? I don't know. Sounds like wings to me. Emma answered. There's light ahead. I can see something moving, Ron said, squinting his eyes. They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceiling arching high above them. It was full of small, jewel-bright birds, fluttering and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room? Said Ron. Probably, said Harry. They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if they all swooped down at once, well, there's no other choice. I'll run. He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other three followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even when Hermione tried her Alohomora charm. Now what? Said Ron. These birds, they can't be here just for decoration, said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering, glittering. They're not birds, Emma said suddenly. They're keys. Winged keys. Look carefully. So that must mean... She looked around the chamber while the other three squinted up at the flock of keys. Yes, look. Broomsticks. We've got to catch the key to the door. But there are hundreds of them, cried Hermione. Ron examined the lock on the door. We're looking for a big, old-fashioned one, probably silver, like the handle, Ron said. They each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring into the midst of the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched keys darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch one. Not for nothing, though, was Harry the youngest seeker in a century. He had a knack for spotting things other people didn't. After a minute's weaving about through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that had a bent wing, as if it had already been caught and stuffed roughly into the keyhole. That one, he called to the others. That big one, there, no, there, with bright blue wings. The feathers are all crumpled on one side. Ron went speeding in the direction that Harry was pointing, crashed into the ceiling, and nearly fell off his broom. We've got to close in on it, Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. Ron, you come at it from above, Hermione, stay below, and stop it from going down, Emma. You go at it from the other direction from me, and I'll try and catch it. Right now. Ron dived. Hermione rocketed upward. Emma went into it. The key dodged all three of them, and Harry streaked after it. It sped toward the wall. Harry leaned forward and with a nasty, crunching noise, pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron, Emma, and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chamber. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, the key struggling in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned. It worked. The moment the lock had clicked open, the key took flight again, looking very battered now that it had been caught twice. Ready? Harry asked the other three, his hand on the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all. But as they stepped into it, light suddenly flooded the room to reveal an astonishing sight. They were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard behind the black chessmen, which were all taller than they were and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. Now what do we do? Harry whispered. It's obvious, isn't it? Said Emma. We've got to play our way across the room. Behind the white pieces, they could see another door. How? Said Hermione nervously. I think, said Ron, we're going to have to be chessmen. He walked up to a black knight and put his hand out to touch the knight's horse. At once, the stones sprang to life. The horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmeted head to look down at Ron. Do we, have to join you to get across? The Black Knight nodded. Ron turned to the other three. This needs thinking about, he said. I suppose we got to take the place of 4 of the black pieces. Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally, he said, Now, don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are that good at chess. We're not offended, said Harry quickly. Just tell us what to do. Well, Harry, you take the place of that bishop, and you will be a rook, and Hermione, you next to her instead of that pawn.
What about you?
I'm going to be a knight, said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because at these words a knight, a rook, a bishop, and a pawn turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Harry, Ron, Emma, and Hermione took. White always plays first in chess, said Ron, peering across the board. Yes, look. A white pawn had moved forward 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? Harry moved diagonally 4 squares to the right. Their first real shock came when their other knight was taken. The white queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board, where he lay quite still, face down. Had to let that happen, said Ron, looking shaken. Leaves you free to take that bishop, Hermione. Go on. Every time one of their men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there was a huddle of limp black players slumped along the wall. Twice, Ron only just noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as they had lost black ones. We're nearly there, he muttered suddenly. Let me think. The white queen turned her blank face toward him. Yes, said Ron softly. It's the only way. I've got to be taken. No. Harry and Hermione shouted. You can't, cried Emma. That's chess, snapped Ron. You've got to make some sacrifices. I take 1 step forward, and she'll take me. That leaves you free to checkmate the king, Harry. But Emma started. Do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron, Harry also started. Look, if you don't hurry up, he'll already have the stone. There was no alternative. Ready? Ron called, his face pale but determined. Here I go, now. Don't hang around once you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron hard across the head with her stone arm, and he crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed, but stayed on her square. The White Queen dragged Ron to one side. He looked as if he'd been knocked out. Shaking, Harry moved 3 spaces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear. With one last desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up the next passageway. What if he's... I'll stay with him, announced Emma. He'll be all right, said Harry. We've had sprouts. That was the devil's snare. Flitwick must have put charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's. No, I won't have any use. Snape will probably have some potions set up, and Quirrell will have something dark. Harry will deal with the dark stuff, and Hermione will do the potions, Emma told them firmly. Hermione ran and gave her sister a hug and said, "We'll be back." Emma nodded, though she was about to cry. Hermione and Harry went through the door, and Emma was left there with Ron to look after. After a while, the doors opened again, and Dumbledore came rushing in through the side the 4 came in through. He waved his wand, and all the chess pieces disappeared. "Professor," cried Emma. "Hello, Miss Granger. Where's your sister and Harry?" he asked. "Through the other door," said a familiar voice. "Ron," Emma exclaimed, and gave him a hug. "Gosh, Em, you're gonna kill me," he said, muffled. Dumbledore cleared his throat and said, "I got an owl, saying that you had come here." "From your sister, too," Dumbledore told us. Emma blushed. "I didn't notice her because I was asleep," Emma explained. He nodded. "Go back," he told us. "All the defenses are gone. You can go back." They nodded and started walking back. It was a quiet walk because they were both wondering the same thing. Was Harry still in the next room, or did he get out like Hermione? By the time they got back, there were stairs back up, so they just had to climb those. They got to the top, and everyone asked questions when they got to the common room. They answered all of them, and Emma had a dreamless sleep that night. Emma's POV. "Harry's awake," cried Hermione one morning. "Really?" I asked, putting down my book. She nodded frantically. I jumped up from bed and ran to the common room. Ron was in there. "Harry's awake," we shouted at him. "What?" he exclaimed. We nodded. We ran to the infirmary until McGonagall told us to walk. We sighed, but obeyed. Once we got to the infirmary, we heard talking, but not the words. "Fine," we heard, and the door rushed open. "Harry," I yelled. I looked ready to fling her arms around him again. "Oh, Harry, we were sure you were going to. Dumbledore was so worried," I started. "The whole school's talking about it," said Ron. "What really happened?" It was one of those rare occasions when the true story is even more strange and exciting than the wild rumors. Harry told us everything. Quirrell, the mirror, the stone, and Voldemort. When Harry told us what was under Quirrell's turban, Hermione screamed out loud. "So the stone's gone," said Ron finally. "Flamel's just going to die?" That's what I said, but Dumbledore thinks that, what was it? To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. "I always said he was off his rocker," said Ron, looking quite impressed at how crazy his hero was. "So what happened to you two?" said Harry. "Well, I got back all right," said Emma. "I dashed up to the Ollery to contact Dumbledore when I met him in the entrance hall. He already knew. He just said, 'Harry's gone after him, hasn't he?' and hurtled off to the 3rd floor. "Do you think he meant you to do it?" said Ron. "Sending you your father's cloak and everything?" "Well," Emma exploded, "if he did, I mean to say that's terrible. You could have been killed. No, it isn't, said Harry thoughtfully. He's a funny man, Dumbledore. I think he sort of wanted to give me a chance. I think he knows more or less everything that goes on here, you know. I reckon he had a pretty good idea we were going to try, and instead of stopping us, he just taught us enough to help. I don't think it was an accident he let me find out how the mirror worked. It's almost like he thought I had the right to face Voldemort if I could. Yeah, Dumbledore's off his rocker, all right, said Ron proudly. Listen, you've got to be up for the end-of-year feast tomorrow. The points are all in and Slytherin won. Of course, you missed the last Quidditch match. We were steamrollered by Ravenclaw without you, but the food'll be good. At that moment, Madame Pomfrey bustled over. You've had nearly 15 minutes. Now out, she said firmly. At dinner. When Harry walked in, there was a sudden hush, and then everybody started talking loudly at once. He slipped into a seat between Ron and Emma, with Hermione being on the other side of Emma, at the Gryffindor table, and tried to ignore the fact that people were standing up to look at him. Fortunately, Dumbledore arrived moments later. The babble died away. Another year gone, Dumbledore said cheerfully. And I must trouble you with an old man's wheezing waffle before we sink our teeth into our delicious feast. What a year it has been. Hopefully your heads are all a little fuller than they were. You have the whole summer ahead to get them nice and empty before next year starts. Now, as I understand it, the House Cup here needs awarding, and the points stand thus. In fourth place, Gryffindor, with 312 points. In third, Hufflepuff, with 352. Ravenclaw has 426 and Slytherin 522. A storm of cheering and stamping broke out from the Slytherin table. I could see Draco Malfoy banging his goblet on the table. It was a sickening sight. Yes, yes, well done, Slytherin, said Dumbledore. However, recent events must be taken into account. The room went very still. The Slytherin smiles faded a little. Ahem, said Dumbledore. I have a few last-minute points to dish out. Let me see. Yes. First, to Mr. Ronald Weasley. Ron went purple in the face. He looked like a radish with a bad sunburn. For the best-played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Gryffindor cheers nearly raised the bewitched ceiling. The stars overhead seemed to quiver. Percy could be heard telling the other prefects, my brother, you know, my youngest brother, got past McGonagall's giant chess set. At last there was silence again. Second, to Miss Hermione Granger. For the use of cool logic in the face of fire, I award Gryffindor House 50 points. Hermione buried her face in her arms. Harry strongly suspected she had burst into tears. Gryffindors up and down the table were beside themselves. They were 100 points up. Third, to Miss Emma Granger, who used quick thinking to get out of a dangerous situation, I award 50 points. I screamed. How did he know about that? Fourth, to Mr. Harry Potter, said Dumbledore. The room went deadly quiet. For pure nerve and outstanding courage, I award Gryffindor House 60 points. The din was deafening. My voice was included. Those who could add up while yelling themselves hoarse knew that Gryffindor now had 522, exactly the same as Slytherin. We had tied for the House Cup, if only Dumbledore had given Harry just one more point. Dumbledore raised his hand. The room gradually fell silent. There are all kinds of courage, said Dumbledore, smiling. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. I therefore award 10 points to Mr. Neville Longbottom. Someone standing outside the Great Hall might well have thought some sort of explosion had taken place. So loud was the noise that erupted from the Gryffindor table. Harry, Ron, me, and Hermione stood up to yell and cheer as Neville, white with shock, disappeared under a pile of people hugging him. He had never won so much as a point for Gryffindor before. Harry, still cheering, nudged Ron, who nudged me in the ribs and pointed at Malfoy, who couldn't have looked more stunned and horrified if he just had the body-bind curse put on him. I smirked and laughed, which means Dumbledore called over the storm of applause, for even Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were celebrating the downfall of Slytherin. We need a little change of decoration. He clapped his hands. In an instant, the green hangings became scarlet and the silver became gold. The huge Slytherin serpent vanished, and a towering Gryffindor lion took its place. Snape was shaking Professor McGonagall's hand with a horrible, forced smile. It was the best evening of my life. Better than winning at Quidditch, or Christmas, or knocking out mountain trolls. I would never, ever forget tonight. I had almost forgotten that the exam results were still to come, but come they did. To their great surprise, both Harry and Ron passed with good marks. Hermione, and me of course, were tied for the best grades of the first years. Even Neville scraped through, his good herbology mark making up for his abysmal potions one. They had hoped that Goyle, who was almost as stupid as he was mean, might be thrown out, but he had passed too. It was a shame, but as Ron said, you couldn't have everything in life. And suddenly our wardrobes were empty. Our trunks were packed. Neville's toad was found lurking in a corner of the toilets. Notes were handed out to all students, warning us not to use magic over the holidays. I always hope they'll forget to give us these, said Fred sadly. I laughed when he said this. Hagrid was there to take us down to the fleet of boats that sailed across the lake. We were boarding the Hogwarts Express, talking and laughing as the countryside became greener and tidier. Eating Bertie Bott's every flavor beans as we sped past Muggle towns, pulling off their wizard robes and putting on jackets and coats, pulling into platform 9 3/4 at King's Cross Station. It took quite a while for us all to get off the platform. A wizened old guard was up by the ticket barrier, letting them go through the gate in 2s and 3s so they didn't attract attention by all bursting out of a solid wall at once and alarming the Muggles. You must come and stay this summer, said Ron. All 3 of you. I'll send you an owl. Thanks, said Harry. I'll need something to look forward to. People jostled them as they moved forward toward the gateway back to the Muggle world. Some of them called, "Bye, Harry. See you, Potter." Still famous, said Emma, grinning at him. Not where I'm going, I promise you, said Harry. He, Ron, me, and Hermione passed through the gateway together. There he is, Mom, there he is, look. It was Ginny Weasley, Ron's younger sister, but she wasn't pointing at Ron. Harry Potter, she squealed. Look, Mom, I can see. Be quiet, Ginny, and it's rude to point. Mrs. Weasley smiled down at them. Busy year, she said. Very, said Harry. Thanks for the fudge and the sweater, Mrs. Weasley. Oh, it was nothing, dear. Yes, thank you, I piped up. She looked at me. Oh, you must be Emma, she said. She gave me a hug. She had a mom sent to her. It was warm and smelled like cinnamon and sweet things. Ready are you? It was Uncle Vernon, still purple-faced, still mustached, still looking furious at the nerve of Harry, carrying an owl in a cage in a station full of ordinary people. Behind him stood Aunt Petunia and Dudley, looking terrified at the very sight of Harry. You must be Harry's family, said Mrs. Weasley. In a manner of speaking, said Uncle Vernon. Hurry up, boy, we haven't got all day. He walked away. Harry hung back for a last word with Ron, me, and Hermione. See you over the summer, then, I said, giving him a hug. Hope you have, a good holiday, said Hermione, looking uncertainly after Uncle Vernon, shocked that anyone could be so unpleasant. He waved and walked away. Hermione and I walked to our own parents and gave them a hug. I thought, I can't wait for next year, as we walked to our car. The end. Thank you for joining us for this incredible journey through Hermione's Sister. We hope you enjoyed exploring this fresh take on the wizarding world and the untold story of Hermione's family. Did you know that Pottergirl 123 originally wrote Hermione's sister as part of a school project? Since then, it's been shared and loved by fans all over the world. Fun fact, the Granger-sibling dynamic has become a recurring theme in Harry Potter fanfiction, with countless interpretations by writers everywhere. What did you think of this unique take on Hermione's story? Which moment stood out to you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this audiobook, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Grimoire Audiobooks for more captivating fanfiction and stories. And make sure to hit the bell so you never miss an upload. As this story reminds us, even the brightest stars shine brighter together. Until next time, keep exploring, keep imagining, and keep finding magic in every corner. See you soon.